Good evening. Welcome to the March 28th Village Board Special Legislative Session, followed immediately by a work session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are you a clerk tonight?
Yes, I am, Madam
Kahan?
Mayor.
All right. Welcome, Clerk Kahan.
Thank you. Trustee Bazemore.
Present.
Trustee Codman.
Present.
Trustee Levin.
Present.
Trustee Herrera.
Present.
And Mayor Garrity.
Present.
Do we have any mayors and trustees announcements?
We do. Would any of my colleagues like to begin? I imagine somebody has something. We haven't had announcements in a couple of weeks. Any items to discuss? Please go right ahead, Trustee Herrera.
So this Friday, the Ossining community has a annual tradition. It's the St. Anne's Catholic Church, located on Eastern Avenue, for the past, I would say, over 25 years, has been doing a Good Friday Stations of the Cross procession that commemorates Holy Week. And that's being held this Friday, beginning at 5:30. And the first station is actually right in front of the church on Eastern Avenue. And it's going to go throughout the village. I don't have the whole route on me, but I know that the police department usually does a pretty good job at sharing the whole route. They usually get about 1,000 people-ish, so it's quite, even though it's of spiritual significance, it's also quite the production. So really to see how they incorporate different cultures and languages and sets and costumes, it's pretty phenomenal to see it on our streets. So, and with that said, I want to wish everyone a very happy Easter and a happy Passover.
Trustee Levin, did you have an announcement?
I never know if this is an announcement or not. I wanted to, so you may correct me, Stuart. The Landlord-Tenant Committee has requested that a certain form be put on. Is that an announcement, or do I need to do that another
Well,
way?
in fact, we actually have
Oh,
Chair Steve Dewey here, who's going to...
Then I have no announcements to make. Steve will make the announcement later, I'm sure.
Well, actually, we were going to just do the mayors and trustees announcements, and then I was going to invite Steve
great.
up to give us an update on what's been going on with the council. Just one moment, Mr. Dewey. Did Trustee Bazemore, Trustee Codman? All right, then I will just update folks on a couple of things that have been going on. Last Friday, actually, Trustee Herrera was there wearing his county hat. We had a meeting with about 5 or 6 dozen representatives from across the county, including state representatives and federal offices, and many, many, many municipalities, talking about in the aftermath of the storm and what the response was like from the power companies in our area. It's obviously Con Ed and NYSEG. For us, it's Con Ed. And we got an update on what are the Public Service Commission and what their role is going to be, doing investigations and holding accountable the power companies. They have a plan that they put forth for emergency management each year, and they actually have it's already structured to have a scoring on how did they perform operationally and communication-wise and preparedness. And so we are providing feedback. Thank you to some of the staff that's already provided feedback on what our experience was in, particularly in communication, as well as the folks who didn't have power for 8 days probably felt like the operational response wasn't what they would have liked. So we just want folks to know that while we thought there were a lot of lessons learned after Sandy, clearly there's still some more learning to go on, and we're all doing our best to be proactive in, so that next season's storms, hopefully we'll see a different level of responsiveness that we can feel a little more confident in. And today I attended an Ossining Basics meeting. Trustee Bazemore is very familiar with this. He attended many of the meetings last year. And you're going to be seeing they have their new promotional materials around in English and in Spanish. There are a couple of signs and brochures here in Village Hall, and you're going to be seeing them all around the community. It was initiated by the school district, but really the goal is to have it be a community partnership, and it has to do with very, very early learning with the mindset that the first 1,000 days of a human being's life is one of the most important moments in their development. And what can we do as a community to help families prepare kids to be ready to learn? And it's a very well-tested approach and program, and the village is very pleased to be partnering with the schools, with the town, with healthcare agencies and the library, and throughout and local businesses as well, to really saturate the community so this becomes a community norm. Do you know what that is, Tom? Do you hear that? Okay, it's just going to annoy me for 3 hours, but as long as you don't hear it on television.
It might be just the lights. Do we need so much lighting?
We could take the dais lights off.
There you go.
I don't know. No, it's whenever I talk.
Oh, so you're getting feedback.
No, the lights, it doesn't matter. It's a microphone thing, no.
Yes.
Yeah, I can turn up
It's actually better for the camera when it's dark.
We usually are like this. The lights are a non-issue. The microphone is an issue, but we'll move on because we've got a lot of exciting things to get to this evening. I just wanted to,
Get that microphone.
yeah, we might swap microphones.
Okay.
So, why don't we move on to introducing Mr. Steve Dewey, who was recently elected to be chair of the Landlord-Tenant Relations Council. And I'll just say another thank you to trustees Levin and Bazemore, who were made up along with Corporation Counsel Kahan, the subcommittee to revitalize the Landlord-Tenant Relations Council and restructure it, give it more powers, give it more teeth, so it could be much more of a resource for our community. So they recently met and selected a chair, and it is Steve Dewey. So please, Steve, join us and tell us a little more about what's been going on.
Well, thanks very much. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. As you said, Omar, thank you to everyone and everyone in the community. We wish you a happy Easter and a happy Passover as well. Some of my members could not make it. My name is Stephen Dewey, and we're glad to announce the revitalization, and we're up and running, of the Landlord-Tenant Relations Council. The purpose of this council, you can find it under the E-codes, under anything under the Ossining Village law. It gives us our powers and our authorities as to what we're here to do, and it really is something for you, the community. We're not a board, we're not a government agency. We are community members as well. We are landlords, we are tenants, and we are members, 9 of us members, that include citizens that have nothing to do with a landlord or tenant relationship. And our sole purpose is to assist tenants and landlords in their relationships to maybe solve simple issues or important issues that affect our daily lives. As there is a great tenant-landlord community here in Ossining, as opposed to just residential houses, this is an important board. And I'm excited. We've met twice now already. With thanks to Ms. Hoffman, we also have a form that is online for you. To get your information about our board, you would go onto the villageofossining.org website. We are known as the LTRC, so our email would be LTRC, Landlord Tenant Relations Council, at villageofossining.org. There is a form, and we've already put it up. Our council's already ahead of the game. We put it up online, and you can fill out the form. It's a request form of an issue that you might have that includes 2 links. There's one on the main page, and then if you were to scroll down under Government in the website, you'll see Landlord-Tenant Relations Council. You'll see our link there to this form. And I don't know where the cameras are, but the form looks something like this. With thanks to Ms. Hoffman, it's also fillable. So you can fill it out, and then that form comes directly to each one of us in the board. If not, contact the village manager's office, 941-3554. A form will either be mailed out to you, or if you can email it in, whatever. Now, our board's going to meet every first Wednesday of the month. It's open to the public, but we do not want public just coming in and saying, hey, I've got an issue. If you wish to meet and have the board address your issue, no matter how small, no matter how minuscule, you need to fill out this form so we know exactly what's going on, and we can address that issue at that point. The idea imperative is that you don't have to go to court. You've not lost your rights any time to go to court, but let us help you with your problem. Whether you're a landlord, tenant, or even a neighbor to a building that may have an issue, let us help you. We are the community. We're not a village, we're not from the government. We're from the government here to help. But we're your village, we're your neighbors. So let us help you. We have actually a trained mediator in our class, Maxine Walters, who I've had the pleasure of working with in the courts, who's a trained mediator. So part of our duties will also be to allow for mediation of your solutions and your problems that might expedite your matters before you even go to the courts. So we thank the board. Thank you again for all of your help and service you give to our community, but thank you for nominating us. I must say, as a totally unbiased opinion, we're a very intelligent, good-looking, and humble board. But I'm really excited. Good people. We invite you to come. Let us help you. And that's what we're here for. And it's our pleasure to serve the community. And again, our information, Landlord Tenant Relations Council at villageofossining.org. It's on the website. And we look forward to working with the community. And thank you, the members and trustees Bazemore and trustees Levin, for giving us the opportunity to serve you. So good evening.
Can I,
Thank you very much, Steve Dewey.
Steve, if I may? So you
Please.
appointed chair, the committee voted, liaisons don't have a vote, but.
I got
did you-
I got the short
Yeah,
straw.
I was there for that, yes, but no, you didn't.
It is my- it's my
But
honor.
also the vice chair, so just so people know, there's also a vice chair.
There is, and our vice chair is Jack Rowley. So people know that our board is not just made up of just landlords. It's made up of, we're one-third landlord related, one-third tenant related, people that are actually tenants in the area and part of tenant councils, and then three ladies who are totally objection. They're homeowners, they're here in the village, all with the purpose of helping the community. And it could be my experience as working with landlord tenants, sometimes it's just not having the right telephone number to contact the landlord to fix a problem or to contact the tenant to say, hey, I got to come in and fix your problem. It could be just as minuscule as that, or it could be a little bit more deep. But yeah, it's a diverse board, willing to help. But Jack is our vice chair, and we don't look at it as a chairman or a vice. It's all of us, all 9 of us are here to assist anyone that has an issue with this endeavor that we can help you out with.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I just want to let the public know that what you're focusing on tonight is the opportunity to be of direct service to community members that may have a conflict or a concern that they need help resolving in a landlord-tenant relationship. But you are also empowered to do a couple of other things, which is general education, either whether it's for tenants' rights or landlord obligations, and you can provide this village board with recommendations if you start seeing concerns over and over again having to do with housing in our community. You can provide us with recommendations or identify concerns that you think that we need to address and differently than we have been. So we're really, really excited to see you guys get underway. It looks like Trustee Bazemore wanted to comment on
Yes,
something.
this actually is a question for Debbie. Is there a way to, for you to either deal with the financial office, whoever's doing our parking, to somehow, if there's a way that either give the people who are coming to get parking tags the form, or some way to be able to cross market to say that we actually have this council up and running. Because typically speaking, for those people who get overnight parking pass, a great deal of them are tenants. So I'm just thinking of ways where we can actually get the word out outside of just our meetings and our website. That's the time that we actually have the ability to actually reach tenants, is when they're getting their parking
idea.
passes.
It is I'm just going to interject. You'll answer, of course. Just that at the last meeting, that was actually a big topic, is communicating and ways of communicating to the public, English and Spanish. So I don't know, if the minutes have reached the village manager, or, because I know minutes were taken, but that was actually a topic that was discussed, and it's a bigger list than that. I mean, it's like a much bigger list, but I mean, I'm just, it should be arriving, because we have to get better with the minutes and getting.
One thing I've done, and with thanks to Council Kahan, who's here with us this evening, we've already approved the minutes. We are out of the gate at 100 miles an hour. Once you approved all of our membership,
I have to look at
we've already been on the gate. This form is already online. The minutes were submitted. I did not check this evening to
Okay.
see if they're on, but every month we'll post our minutes just to see what we did. There will be no confidentiality in any tenant or any landlord that comes to the board. That's not the purpose. The minutes tell you where the council has seen or what we've been directed or asked to do.
Okay.
But yes, those minutes were done, and then our next meeting obviously is next Wednesday. But I don't have any information as to the parking. I'm sorry, Council, Trustee.
So I think that's a really great idea, is having something that our staff can have available to leave people. When they get a ticket, they also get a little, here's what's happening, or here's where you can go.
A parking pass.
A parking
Yeah,
path.
yeah, not ticket.
Hopefully preventing a ticket is the goal.
Or when they
yeah.
get tickets. Either way. Either way.
I think as far as marketing the program, I think that we will be posting your minutes on our website,
Please do.
which is going to be helpful. And then anything that I can do that you can think of, if you can just email me and say, you know, can we do this? You know, we'll be happy to work with you, because I do think that the value that you and your team bring is so important to our community. So, you know, it will be important for us to get that message out to people, and also be able to help them find a way that they can talk to somebody, because it is something that often is the barrier between resolution. It's just they need somebody to talk to. And so we'll work on some marketing pieces that we can get out, and we'll get maybe a different type of a sheet up on our website as well. But the minutes definitely will go up there, so
They should be up.
anything that I can do to help you.
If I may add to that, I know you've got a busy schedule and you're trying to do 2 meetings tonight, but part of that point, to your point, is that we are authorized and allowed to do mediation. Mediation, for those that don't know, we actually do in a courtroom. Mediation is non-binding, but it is an opportunity, almost in a quasi-legal, and I don't make any bones, it's not that you're getting legal advice, our board cannot offer legal advice, but we can mediate something, and we can hopefully resolve a settlement, even if it's in writing, but resolve something. And again, it may be something as simple as, oh, I didn't realize this, or the landlord says, I didn't realize this. If it's just a matter of getting the 2 people in the room, we're glad to do it for you. But there is mediation that we're authorized to do, and we look forward to doing that as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to delay your meeting any further.
Oh, we're glad you were here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, folks.
All right.
Next, we have administrative reports. Village manager.
You know, in the interest of time and 2 meetings, I think I'll just defer and say Happy Easter and Happy Passover to everyone, and we have a lot to talk about, but I'll just defer.
Well done.
All I will say as corporation counsel is I'm happy to report that tickets for garbage and solid waste are being actively issued by the building department. We have had at least, I think, 4 or 5 weeks of court appearances where those have come in. I'm pleased to report that most of the people who have received the tickets come in and pay their violations, and the issues have been cleaned up. If anyone does have complaints with regard to garbage or anything like that, please contact the building department. They do have the ticket books. They're out writing them, and we will take care of that, and then it'll show up on as quick a court calendar as we can get it on.
And I'm just curious, who did you say is the department that's been writing the tickets? Is it
Primarily, it's
Sanitation,
the building
building?
department. Sanitation would be with regard to oversized sanitation containers, but if people are leaving stuff out of the curb, or if there's other issues with regard to trash, that's generally being written by one of our code enforcement officers.
Okay, great. Glad to hear that's happening.
Next, organization announcements. Do we have anyone in the audience who wishes to make any organizational announcements this evening?
Do you have any events coming up, fundraisers, programs you want the public to know about? You've got 2 minutes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. All right.
Okay, moving on. Village Board resolutions. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board on any of the resolutions that are on this evening's agenda?
That'd be items that are on the legislative
agenda.
which would be any of the resolutions, items A
A through
through,
H.
thank you. If you wanted to comment on any of those, you have 4 minutes to comment on any and all of those. All right.
Moving on. Resolution A, resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the minutes of the March 6, 2018 regular meeting as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
On the board? Mr. Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution B, resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the minutes of the March 14, 2018 special meeting as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
On the board? Clerk?
It's
All those in favor?
been a while. Was I?
You were not at the 14th. That was the 9
Okay,
a.m.
so I
one.
guess I abstain on that, please.
Okay. Okay. Resolution C, Resolved.
Oh, we
that
didn't say aye.
Did the rest of us aye on
We
that?
didn't, we didn't aye. We didn't aye at all.
Could you all? Aye? Or?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Got it.
Making sure we said it. so.
Thank you, sir.
I get the right hat on. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the minutes of the March 22, 2018 special meeting as presented.
Oh, wait a minute, what are we talking about here?
What is
This was just the three folks who were, because this was the Thursday meeting that we had.
Okay, so actually, it was four of us. That's the one Rico wasn't at.
No, I
The
also
14th, what was the 14th?
She
The
wasn't-
14th was the
she-
work session.
It was a work session.
And that was here. That
Yeah,
was 2
and
weeks
you-
ago. That was here.
Oh,
We
You
were
were
all
here.
here.
You were
We
here
were
for
all
that
here.
one I wasn't
We
here
screwed up
for.
our votes. What do we do
Sorry.
here?
Okay, why don't we, I'm going to read it again.
Thank
and we will
you.
do it once
Sorry,
again.
folks.
No, it's
Oh,
okay.
the reason why it's funny dates is because the 6th was the Tuesday night that we
can't
did
make-
for the other storm, and it was also in
Okay.
this room. That's why
Okay.
all the dates are funny. Okay.
Going back to Resolution B, resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the minutes of the March 14, 2018 special meeting as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Second.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Sorry, jumped the gun there a little.
Resolution C, resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the minutes of the March 22, 2018 special meeting as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
On the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
One
Abstain.
Okay,
Got it, thank you. Okay.
now we got it.
Resolution D,
There we are.
whereas the Think Differently initiative is about promoting awareness and acceptance of all people and advocating for the inclusion of all individuals living on the autism spectrum and with special needs. And whereas our state and communities are stronger because of our diversity and differences, and whereas according to the Center for Disease Control, over 55 million people, or approximately 19% of Americans, have a type of disability or special need. And whereas for some people with special needs, the very things that make them unique can also keep them on the sidelines, separate from those who might not understand their differences or uniquenesses. And whereas it is important to promote and provide guidance to those with special needs on how to access publicly supported services available to them in their community, and whereas it is important to encourage and educate the community and businesses on ways they can make facilities and services more accessible, and on how to train staff to welcome and support special needs customers and coworkers, and whereas the goal of this initiative is to provide a supportive and inclusive environment for individuals of all abilities by supporting community events that expand family-friendly opportunities for people with special needs and their families, and whereas adopting the Think Differently initiative is an important statement that the Village of Ossining officials, business owners, and residents can make to show their support for the differently abled children and adults with special needs and their families. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Ossining adopts the Think Differently initiative so that the village, its residents and business owners, all are better prepared to communicate with, provide for, and support those living on the autism spectrum and with special needs. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
On the board, anybody like to comment on this?
I'm just very happy that we're doing this, and it's great that we're going out of our way to just reinforce a notion that we all believe that it's okay to be different, and in Ossining, we accept everyone for who you are.
Thank you. Yes, and we're doing it at this moment because April 2nd is World Autism Awareness Day, which is why we're passing it now, so that it's in place for that occasion next Monday. And I did want to just call out one of the departments that is particularly aware of being mindful of how to interact in a thoughtful and effective way with folks who have special needs is our police department. And whether that's folks with disabilities, where there is a training that happens upon recruitment, and then also an in-service refresher training for all of the officers throughout their career. And they also participate in the Kind Find, which is a voluntary database of families with children with special needs, as well as the Teddy Bear Clinic, which happens at Phelps to help kids be less frightened of medical treatments, and that also includes a component for folks, for kids who have special needs. And it's just some tangible examples of the consciousness that that we have in the village. And this particular initiative of the Think Differently resolution was brought to us by folks in Dutchess County, and that whole county has dedicated a significant amount of outreach and awareness. So this was really just something that is affirming our general value of everyone, however they come to us and whatever their differences are. But I think it's an opportunity for us to reach out to our partners in the community and to be more aware of programs that exist and to look for more opportunities when we can be more flexible and thoughtful and mindful in our programming, whether that's through our own village directly or just providing connections and resources in the community. So thank you to all of my colleagues for being so supportive of this. I'm glad that we are moving this forward tonight.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution E. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby awards the bid for contract number OFD-18-01, furnish and deliver one new 22-passenger command vehicle to Factory Direct Bus Sales, 135 Haven Avenue, Port Washington, New York, 11050, for the bid amount of $66,865 as the lowest bid received from a responsive and responsible bidder. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
On the board? Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution F. Whereas by resolution adopted on November 15, 2017, the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees as lead agency issued a positive declaration of significance pursuant to the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQRA, in connection with the petition filed by Ossining River Associates petitioner for a text amendment to the Village of Ossining Code, Chapter 270. And whereas on December 13, 2017, a public scoping session was conducted in the boardroom at 16 Croton Avenue, prior to which time the draft scoping document was provided to all involved agencies and also made available to any individual or interested agency that had expressed an interest in writing to the lead agency. And whereas at the public scoping session on December 13, 2017, the Board of Trustees as lead agency heard from members of the public about the proposed text amendment and changes to the Conservation Development District. And in addition to receiving statements at the public scoping session, documents and letters were received by the lead agency. And whereas the Village of Ossining Planning Board conducted 2 public work sessions on January 29, 2018 and February 12, 2018, reviewing the proposed draft scoping document. And whereas the petitioner, through its counsel, consented to a 60-day extension of time for the lead agency to provide a final scoping document. And whereas the village revised the draft scoping document to include the comments made at the public scoping session, the planning board work sessions, from correspondence received from the involved and interested agencies, as well as members of the public, and from comments by members of the Board of Trustees. And whereas the Board of Trustees reviewed the scoping document at its work session on March 14, 2018, now therefore be it resolved that the final scoping document, Annexed Tier 2, is adopted by the Board of Trustees as lead agency pursuant to Title VI, Part 617 of the Rules and Regulations of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and be it further resolved that the adopted final scoping document will be provided to all involved agencies and persons or parties who have requested copies, as well as posted on the village's website. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Would anyone like to comment on this? Okay, well, I'll just sort of reiterate some of the comments encapsulated in our last discussion of this. And I want to say thank you to our staff and to our planning board and to members of the public who did provide feedback during the public hearing as well as in writing following the public hearing. If you've had a chance to review the final scoping document, you'll see it's really quite different than the draft scoping document. And it's worth reiterating briefly where we are in the SEQRA process for folks who are following this and are following as well a number of developments in the greater Ossining area. The scoping document is the very, very first step in a SEQRA process, and the SEQRA process that we're undertaking is to examine if the board wants to make a change to our comprehensive plan that would then open the door for the potential of a development that is of greater density than is currently permitted. We're looking specifically at the conservation development districts. There's 2 zones in the village that fall into this, and one of them has a significant property that is owned by the petitioner who requested that we undertake this exploration of the potential text amendment. There is no proposal for the development officially yet because they're waiting to see if we amend our zoning regulations in a manner that would permit that. What the scoping document is essentially the table of contents for what we are going to be exploring in the draft environmental impact statement, which Stuart, I believe you guesstimated that might be available this fall, the draft environmental impact statement.
6, 8 months perhaps.
6 or 8 months, and then we will have additional opportunities for the public to weigh in. That'll certainly have a
Yes.
public hearing, and I imagine we'll also be hearing from some of our land use boards, like the Environmental Advisory Council at that time.
Precisely correct.
Okay, so, any further comment on where we are in this process?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution G. Whereas certain tax certiorari proceedings were instituted against the assessor of the Town of Ossining, Board of Assessment review of the Town of Ossining and the Town of Ossining by LDM of Ossining Corp. to review the assessment against petitioner's property situated 59-61 Central Avenue in the Village of Ossining and designated as Section 89.19, Block 5, Lot 64, for the 2012 to 2015 assessment years, which proceedings were commenced in the Supreme Court of the State of New York, Westchester County, under index number 66830, 2012, 65645, 2013, 67254, 2014, and 67344, 2015. And whereas the Village of Ossining ceased being a tax assessing unit in 1989 and now adopts the Town of Ossining assessment roll for the Village of Ossining as prepared by the assessor of the Town of Ossining for all subsequent years. And whereas on February 9, 2018, a consent judgment was entered in favor of the petitioner LDM of Ossining Corp. Against the Town of Ossining, correcting, fixing, and reducing the assessed valuations of the aforesaid real property and the improvements situated thereon as set forth in Schedule A annexed hereto. And whereas the aforesaid consent judgment, among other things, directs the Village of Ossining to audit and pay to the petitioner the amount of all village taxes paid by the petitioner as taxes against the said erroneous assessments in excess of what the taxes would have been if the assessment made in the aforesaid years had been determined by this order. And whereas any and all refunds of taxes necessitated by said consent judgment are to be made without interest if paid within 60 days after service upon the village of a certified copy of the consent judgment with notice of entry. And whereas the consent judgment with notice of entry was served upon the Town of Ossining Assessor's Office by petitioner on February 12, 2018, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining, upon certification by the Village Treasurer that all of the aforesaid taxes have been paid, hereby authorizes and directs the Village Treasurer to make the payment of such refund of real property taxes due to LDM of Ossining Corp. To Griffin, Coogan, Sulzer, and Horgan, P.C., as attorney and agent for the petitioner, as required by said consent judgment, and be it further resolved that the Village Treasurer is authorized to make the aforesaid payment so the Village may avoid the payment of any penalties, and be it further resolved that the Village Treasurer shall make a notation in the margin of the assessment rolls of the Village of Ossining that said assessments were reduced and payment of a refund in the overpayment of real property taxes was made pursuant to said judgment, and the amount of the payment here would be $1,985.45. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
On the board? Clerk Kahan?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution H. Whereas a certain tax certiorari proceeding was instituted against the assessor of the Town of Ossining, Board of Assessment review of the Town of Ossining and the Town of Ossining by 204 Spring Street Associates, LLC, to review the assessment against petitioner's property situated at 204-206 Spring Street in the Village of Ossining and designated as Section 97.07, Block 5, Lot 64, for the 2017 assessment year, which proceeding was commenced in the Supreme Court of the State of New York, Westchester County, under index number 66189, 2017. And whereas the Village of Ossining ceased being a tax assessing unit in 1989 and now adopts the Town of Ossining assessment roll for the Village of Ossining as prepared by the assessor of the Town of Ossining for all subsequent years, and whereas on February 9, 2018, a consent judgment was entered in favor of the petitioner 204 Spring Street Associates, LLC, against the Town of Ossining, correcting, fixing, and reducing the assessed valuations of the aforesaid real property and improvements situated thereon as set forth in Schedule A annexed hereto, and whereas the aforesaid consent judgment, among other things, directs the Village of Ossining to audit and pay to the petitioner the amount of all village taxes paid by the petitioner as taxes against the said erroneous assessments in excess of what the taxes would have been if the assessment made in the aforesaid years had been determined by this order, and whereas any and all refunds of taxes necessitated by the said consent judgment are to be made without interest if paid within 60 days after service upon the village of a certified copy of the consent judgment with notice of entry, and whereas the consent judgment with notice of entry was served upon the Town of Ossining Assessor's Office by petitioner on February 12, 2018, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining, upon certification by the village treasurer that all the aforesaid taxes have been paid, hereby authorizes and directs the village treasurer to make the payment of such refund of real property taxes due to 204 Spring Street Associates LLC to Griffin, Coogan, Sulzer, and Horgan as PC as attorney and agent for the petitioner as required by said consent judgment, and be it further resolved that the village treasurer is authorized to make the aforesaid payment so the village may avoid the payment of any penalties, and be it further resolved that the village treasurer shall make a notation in the margin of the assessment rolls of the village of Ossining that said assessments were reduced and payment of a refund of the overpayment of real property taxes was made pursuant to said judgment, and the overpayment or repayment here would be $634.68. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
On the board. Clerk Kahan.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Visitor recognition. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board on any item? You would have 3 minutes to do so.
3 minutes?
Sorry.
Thanks, Stuart.
Are you setting the
Green?
timer, Stuart?
Yeah, I'm going to do that, right?
No, it's 5 minutes. You say 5 minutes, Stuart? Good evening, everyone. Manuel Quesada, 242 Spring Street. It was interesting in the beginning of the meeting. There was the talks about communication and how do we relay message to the rest of the community. So the reason why I'm here today is because while I was a little bit of history, last year, budget season, there was a request of the planning department where applications were to be any applicant that goes in front of the planning board, zoning board, architectural review board, or any land board, they had to do their own mailing. That was the request from our village planner at that time. Well, I was on the board, and 99% of the people that were at that meeting are here, actually. My recollection is we said we were not going to do that, that we were going to still have our planning department do all notifications to the public of the applications. And I give very lengthy reasons why, and one of them is because of how much money we charge for an application. Minimum application, I believe, is about $250. 2018, a new website comes up, beautiful website, a lot of work was put in. One of the things that was in the planning department was all applicants need to do their own notification to the public of anything that goes on in there. So my question is, what happened? Why did this change? How come if it changed, our applications fees do not match other communities that do this? Because I did a little bit of research before, and communities like Tarrytown, Sleepy Hollow, Postchester, and other villages similar to Ossining, the application fee is about $50, plus whatever the certified mail they have to do as individuals or applicants. Here's $250 plus their mailing, whatever the mailing may be. Now, I attended the zoning board meeting the other day, and it's still not clear what is going on in there, how the notifications are getting done. So I have two questions. Why did that change if there was a direct order from the board at that time that that was not to happen, but yet it happened anyway? And if it did happen, how come that wasn't publicized to the community at large? You know, we talked about when you get a parking sticker, you get this as a tenant. That did not happen in this case. And I think I have 7 seconds. So I don't expect an answer today, but I'll come back next week at the courthouse, and I hope I get an answer then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quesada.
Thank
Good
you.
timing.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Van Steen.
Good evening. 3 minutes is a tough thing, so
Evening.
hold off
You
on
got
that.
this.
I'll try to speed speak this thing. John Van Steen, 78 South Highland Avenue. In 2016, you, our village board, hired Community Housing Innovations as a consultant, asking him to find the apartment vacancy rate in Ossining. You issued to him instructions on the criteria to use in this study, and you spent $5,000. The final report of Alex Roberts clarified the process utilized in his preliminary report, and in this report he stated that John Van Steen correctly stated the rental vacancy rate in Ossining is 6.78%. Your consultant went further to basically debunk ETPA and suggested other methods to assist tenants be utilized. You've never recognized the existence of this report or its findings to the public. In 2017, you hired Kevin Dwarka Associates to perform a housing needs assessment. You spent $50,000 on this study. The eighth and final recommendation was consideration of ETPA. He prioritized his recommendations in the order in which they should be implemented and stated consideration of ETPA should be deferred until the other 7 recommendations had been implemented. He considered a time of 3 years for this to happen. Well, here we are in 2018. We notice that you've allocated $150,000 in this year's budget for reevaluation of the Village of Ossining Comprehensive Plan, which is a thorough process that's derived from community examination and input. But would you follow through on this process, or would you preempt it? Because after all, what are you doing today? A mere 6 months after Kevin Dwarka's report, you reintroduced discussion of ETPA, but at your February 21st work session, to the dismay of some of those watching, rather than having an objective discussion of the merits and demerits of the issue, you spent considerable time examining how the wording for the RFP that would conclude with an apartment vacancy rate for Ossining could be manipulated and calculations rigged to help you reach a final figure that would enable you to achieve your own personal political ends. Never in this discussion was there a mention or a consideration of what was best for the Ossining community as a whole. Never was there a question regarding the cost. Never was there a thought of a SWOT analysis. Hopefully today's discussion of the RFP will reveal a board with commitment to community rather than to personal political ends. Now before our planning board is a draft of legislation that could dramatically alter the population density as well as the financial viability of our village. Upon passage, this would become law immediately and will preempt anything in the proposed comprehensive plan. These issues raise the following questions. Why do we spend taxpayer dollars on studies if you, our village board, are not going to follow the advice of the consultants, but insist on following your own personal ideologies? Have you asked for and received honest and informed assessments of the professionals around you, or are you directing those professionals in a manner in which the conclusions that they reach meet your own ends? What financial analysis have you considered when examining these programs?
Thank you, Mr. Van
I've
Steen.
got another 2 minutes to go, but I understand.
If you want to submit the rest of
Yeah.
your comments in writing, please do.
Okay.
And I did not comment on Mr. Quesada's comment. We don't necessarily, this isn't a back and forth. I didn't hear any factual errors in your question, Mr. Quesada, and I'm sure that staff would like an opportunity to look into it and respond to us offline and then follow through with that. In this case, I will just make one correction that there was not $5,000 spent on the study with CHI 2 years ago. I believe the amount spent was actually $500 ultimately. Although we were billed more, we didn't feel that the amount that was ultimately billed is not what had been agreed upon beforehand. So I just want to point out that factual change. The rest of what you said is, subjective. So I will leave it there. Unless anybody else feels the
Anyone
need
else
to
who wishes
comment?
to address the board? Not seeing anyone else, entertain a motion to adjourn to work session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. And we still have an exciting meeting ahead of us. So, I see that Susie Ross is here. She is one of the folks representing Green Ossining, but I believe you have some other Green Ossining committee members here.
Do.
Do you need technology
I
setup help? Okay. You have a thumb drive in your hand. That's a good sign. Okay,
on?
we can get the screen. That's easy enough to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me get out of the way.
Rika, just don't sit in that chair if you move. It's the,
that the bad chair?
Yeah.
We give that to the special.
We talked about, listen,
Yes.
talk to the rest of my colleagues.
What?
Told Debbie to talk to the rest of my colleagues. Ooh, the words you use. Oh my God.
Well, scandalous.
Oh my God.
Do you need something, or you're good? No, I think I'm good. Let me shut this off before you get You want some tea or coffee or something?
I'm good. Thank you, Rika. Oh, wow. I'll do the same thing.
Thank you, by the way, for giving Green Ossining the opportunity to walk you through this proposal. It's a very exciting thing for us. We've been talking about this for about 2 years. With me tonight, I get to do the presenting, but the folks that really did the work are sitting behind me. John Bell, who's been in the community for years and has been working on a number of different green efforts for longer than I've been here. Kate Marshall's a relatively newcomer to Ossining, but she's been doing amazing things. And if anybody ever goes by the corner of M. Wilton, right outside the high school, she's the person that put together that little library in the front of her house. And she has become a really wonderful member of Green Ossining. And also I have Sachin Sawhney, who actually worked on the Cedar Lane Garden. So as we're talking about gardens, I have a lot of expertise behind me. And again, I get the opportunity to present this great proposal to all of you. As I said, we've been talking about this for about 2 years because last year's Earth Day Festival, every year we come up with a theme, and last year's theme was food sustainability. And so about 2 years ago, we started talking about, as we were planning for last year's festival, this whole idea of community gardens. And we all know there is a community garden in Ossining, but it's Cedar Lane, and it's the town, and it's kind of out there. And as part of our conversation, food sustainability, one of the pillars of food sustainability is access to food. And there are other parts of that, but with that in mind, we kind of sought some type of solution, potentially a community garden somewhere in the Village Central. And over the last, I'd say, year or so, we kind of solidified our thoughts. So what I'm presenting with you tonight, what I'm presenting here tonight to you is, it's not buttoned up. It is, and it's not, but it's not soft. I mean, we've got some real ideas behind it. We've got some expertise behind it. We've got a location in mind. And so what I want to start off with showing you is just a really short video. And I imagine that from that video, you'll have questions, and I hope to address those in the presentation and then any conversation afterwards.
Into this, a community garden, a place where people work together, growing food, relationships, a web of interdependence, a forum for education, and inspiration for a more sustainable world. Green Ossining has a plan to make it happen. Our mission is to create an environment where the people of Ossining can enjoy the benefits of organic gardening close to where we live, where we can explore effective organic gardening methods and practices, where we can generate and nurture connections within the community to promote sustainability, nutrition, cultural and economic diversity, and personal well-being. Our plan is to engage community groups as partners in this project. This is different than the traditional community gardens model. In this way, organizations could define their own goals and needs, organize their own volunteers to do the work in the garden, and work with Green Ossining to extend and expand opportunities within the garden community. Green Ossining would manage the garden overall and coordinate partnerships as well as generate opportunities to promote our mission. The benefits to Ossining are clear. We think this garden will spark healthy community organizing, provide intergenerational exposure to cultural traditions, bring people closer to nature, and allow them to interact with each other in a socially meaningful and physically productive way. As Ossining Village is just beginning to improve its waterfront, this will add beauty and heighten people's awareness and appreciation of this area. In fact, community gardens have been shown to actually increase property values in the immediate vicinity. But we need your help. We propose the village commit to making the space at 7 Water Street available. In order to move forward, we need to investigate viability of the site through soil testing and availability of water and other resources. And we need to address safety, especially if this is going to be a shared space. We'll also need to explore options for funding, site clearing, and building garden beds, but the initial commitment needs to come from the Village of Ossining. Please help us make Green Ossining Community Gardens grow.
Historic downtown Ossining, rediscovering the heart of our village.
You guys found that exciting? Yeah, very exciting. Okay. Actually, I think I actually have to say, I don't know how I'm going to stand here. Do you want us to click? You click for it. You know what? Better yet?
Yes.
Okay, you're done. So.
Make sure you talk into the microphone.
Okay. Is this on? Now it's on. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully you guys like that. That was Kate's voice, by the way. In addition to myself, Sachin is also going to do a little segment here, very relative, so we're going to switch it up in a second. So just to go through, basically what we're going to cover tonight is the benefits and the goals, the proposed location, which you heard on the video, management and administration, which I know is going to be a very large part of whether or not this goes anywhere. So a draft plan of what we think the garden may look like, some potential partners and supporters that we think might be ideal or suitable for this particular model that we're thinking of, benefits of this particular garden versus Cedar Lane, which is the community garden everybody knows about, and preliminary assessment, some of the things that we think that we're going to need in order to go to actually move to, any next steps. And then, of course, there are going to be some additional needs and a timeline that we're proposing, which is quite aggressive, but it may work. So, benefits of community gardens, a lot of these things are things most of us would recognize as being benefits. I'm going to mention them because you kind of have to just say it in order for me to move on. There are huge benefits to community gardens, an increase of sense of community and ownership. Anybody who works in a community garden definitely feels much more invested in the community that they live in, so that's an upside to it. It offers a focal point for community organizing, and we've talked about intergenerational connections. This is one of those things that we think would be a benefit to our community and offer that opportunity. We know it would add beauty, especially to that particular parcel of land. And we'll mention this, and we have pictures, but just remember that this particular parcel of land that we're talking about is basically a welcoming sign for people who are coming over to our riverfront now. So there are people that are coming through our community for the very first time, and what they see when they come over that bridge can be a telltale sign of what our community, are a reflection of our community. And as noted in the video, community gardens also have been shown to actually increase property values in the immediate vicinity. So, and the last thing being, we think that it's a very healthy and inexpensive opportunity for the youth, and we think it brings them closer to nature. If anybody knows anything about Clearwater, the model of bringing people out into the river, That model of exposing people to nature works, and we think this could be a very opportunistic way to do that. So the goals of our garden, though, are to provide an environment where community groups can share the benefits of gardening together. We'll talk a little bit more about that model. Advance opportunities for community members to explore effective gardening, effective organic gardening. Generate connections within the community to promote, which is, one of Green Austening's missions is to promote sustainability. So this is very much in line with our mission. And of course, nutrition, personal well-being, and cultural diversity. We think that this is a step towards revitalizing our waterfront, and with all the things that are going on that everyone's talking about that are very positive, with people coming in from different communities, we think this is a great way to continue that feeling of revitalization of the riverfront. The garden itself provides that missing access to, we talked about Cedar Lane briefly, but Cedar Lane is not accessible. It's certainly not accessible to Village Centric. So this is another opportunity and another way for people within the village downtown to have another thing to do that they have access to. And the last thing is an opportunity for lessons in economic independence. I read a statistic, I think it was 20% of Westchester County has food scarcity issues, or something like that. It was quite a high number, and so this whole concept of having some type of economic independence from, what we would normally go to the store to pay for, this is something that we should be able to offer our community. So the comprehensive plan has been very a hot topic. I want to take a point from the comprehensive plan that has to do with the waterfront vision, and that is to redevelop the waterfront area by maximizing the Hudson River as the village's defining visual, open space, and recreational amenity, while at the same time promoting mixed-use development that will supply economic support to the community. So lo and behold, if we use the comprehensive plan as a guide, we have, we're in line with comprehensive plan, so plus for us, right? I'm going to turn it over to Sachin now so he can talk a little bit about the location.
Okay, thank you. Well, the location is a view that I have to look at every day that I get up outside my window, but that's irrelevant. That's not the point. That's not the discussion. But it's important.
It's key.
So one of the things, the reason, I've seen a transformation within the village of Ossining over the last 9 years that I've been here, and it's been a good progression. It's going in a good way. Thank you, Mayor, for doing everything that you've been doing, and the board. So one of the things that, one of the takeaways is when I have family visit or anyone sort of comes by, they go and they'll go into the village and they'll be like, wow, this is amazing. This is a great place. And then they'll kind of make their way down. Now they have Westerly or that place, and everyone looks at it and it's like, wow, that's awesome. But when people start going and coming towards where I live or where I am, they're just like, what is this? Why does this look like a dump? Why does it look like this? And it's been like that for the longest time, and I know the village gets some amount of money from that location. All I guess I want to say is, if there are ways to look at more of a long-term solution, if we were to sort of identify, say, this organic garden or something within the area that would actually benefit, because the one beauty thing about this is there's a train track that runs right across it, okay? I've missed my train at times and ended up in Croton, and as I look out, I see that, and that sort of also symbolizes in some respects what Ossining is doing. Now just imagine there's a garden there. It's got all the little businesses sort of put out for the village. You've got sort of a beautification area, and that train passes by and it's like, oh my God, what is this? What is Ossining doing, right? What is Ossining growing? And I think that would have a great impact on the village revitalization and the river and sort of all these components that I think would be very important. Susie, back to you. Did I miss anything? Mm-hmm. Oh, keep going, sorry. All right, so this is the, in case you haven't seen it, this is the aerial view. It's actually gotten worse the last month or so, but we're not going to go there. Every time there's a wind or there's a massive dust storm that also forms, so you get a lot of dust coming in, and that's just, again, it's just not, very conducive to sustainability, if that's the right word. Again, it's gotten a lot worse. This is actually not bad. But this is how it used to be. Okay, now granted, this is not exactly how we wanted it to be, but just look at the difference between this and this. And we're not even talking, we're just talking nature having its course, right? And how we could actually do a lot better job in promoting it. So that's, if that photo doesn't give you a takeaway, there's nothing else I could really say that would. So, Susie, back to you.
So this, I'm sure, is probably one of, it could be an obstacle, but as I had mentioned earlier, we see ourselves pretty much in front and center to the management and administration of the garden. So could you be entirely hands-off? Of course not. We see this as a joint partnership between Green Ossining and the village. This is not something we could do on our own, but we don't expect a lot of resources from you once we get this thing up and running. So let me see if I can take you through. So this, just as an example, is what we're thinking. This is kind of the model we're thinking of. We're not wed to this layout, but the whole idea being that the plots, and again, distinct from Cedar Lane, where it's much more of an individual type of caring for your individual plots, we see this as, something where community groups would have, and that's part of our plan as well. The community groups would have, their particular plot on their own, and they would manage it. So we see potential partners in this as Ossining High School. And again, this is just a list that we just, kind of off the top of our head made sense, but none of these are, we haven't spoken to, anyone who basically said, that's what I want to do, but we know that some of these would be very interested in actually having a plot. Ossining High School, I believe that Kate actually spoke to St. Anne's. Ossining High School, local businesses, Neighbors Link, which is going to be, as you know, coming into Ossining. Ossining Food Pantry, community service organizations, the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, Houses of Worship, Intergenerate, which, by the way, we used as a consultant on some of our ideas here, and that is a group that actually can help us get this garden up and going because they are a network. They're, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're somewhat of a network of community gardens, and they provide a lot of resources and funding potentially to get things up. Did I state that correctly?
They actually both run several community gardens in northern Westchester, and they also do function as a network and a source of advice and support for community gardens throughout Westchester.
And as I mentioned, housing developments in neighborhoods, as if you go back to this plot again, we use the church and Snowden houses as examples. And this is how we see the administration of it. So basically Green Ossining running it. There would be somebody who runs the daily operations that would be a liaison to the village. We see a garden membership coordinator, but everybody else below that level, the partners and the gardeners, are all kind of reporting into each other. And it would be their responsibility to report into us, and then we would be liaison with you. So again, Cedar Lane has been brought up a number of times. Why do we need another community garden? This one would be urban and village centric as opposed to the one that's on the outside of the town. This one would focus on community building rather than the individual gardening. This would enhance the ability for organizations within the village to actually do better community service. And then there's the economic development piece of this, which is having accessibility, independence, and walkability to a resource that they don't currently have. So our next step, should we You know, should you decide that this is something you want us to pursue, we would not be able to do much without knowing what the soil is like and whether this garden can actually be used in that plot of land. And just to mention too, one thing I think when we go back a couple slides here, I just want to show you, we're not speaking of the entire area of that 7 Water Street. That squared-in area is what we're talking about. So it's not the entire use of that property. What we hope to do in this plot is to at least to provide some proof of concept. Will this work? Could it be expanded in other places? So by giving us that small part of that property, we could figure this out. So last, we were talking about soil testing, and that would be the first thing that we'd need to know. We'd need to know whether there was access to water. We also have some sense of need to understand security. We would probably want the garden fenced off from what is currently it would be shared with. We'd also want some form of commitment. I don't think a year is going to allow us to, I'm sure there'll be mistakes made and things that we'll have learned, but I think if we invest that kind of time and money into something, we need a little bit longer than a year. And then security options. Is this going to be a locked gate? Is this going to be, you know, so those are the kinds of things we'd want to understand before we could proceed. And then we identified some additional needs, and whether it's village funded or other sources, there's a list of things that we've identified as things we'd want. We do see that there would be community groups that would be interested in helping us with the funding of some of these things, and we know that there are grants out there, so we wouldn't expect this to be completely village funded. And just in terms of timeline, as I mentioned, it was somewhat aggressive. If we could get the go-ahead to proceed and do soil testing, you know, now through April at some point, we'd like to be able to announce it at your Earth Day Festival and open it at next year's Earth Day Festival. So a couple of steps along the way. It's aggressive, but that's what we're thinking.
Hey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good.
You can leave that up though, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
So any questions?
I have many.
Why don't you kick us off then, Trustee Levitt?
So I love community gardens. I love them both. I went to the one in Detroit that is really managed by a church. Sorry. That's managed by a church. Phenomenal. But it's a community garden managed by a church because in that part of Detroit, half the neighborhood is just shuttered and empty. I mean, there's just, so this actually revitalized for different reasons. So there's a cost issue. And where I work, my other job, we have a community garden that was almost fully funded by Whole Foods Foundation. We use it for people with autism, actually. So we have an education purpose that's different. So there are many ways to use this. I'm like, my head is spinning because you hit so many points. There is a cost issue, and it was surprisingly more expensive than we had ever anticipated, which is why it was supposed to start last year and didn't. There's a lot about, in your presentation, so I'm going to stay a little bit focused. I would just suggest a couple of things. Number one, it's not this versus another community garden, because whoever has to pay for this, you know, there is a question of why another one and how much is that used. I would say that this should complement another community. Like, what is the benefit to the village to have 2 of them? And maybe sort of delineate in a very positive way how they complement it. Because one is done by individuals. There are people that don't want to be in groups, and there are people that don't belong to groups. So I would just strengthen this a bit by saying, actually, it's very complementary. I do like the waterfront idea. I would have to find out more about what we're doing. And my issue is that once you start a community garden in that square red rectangular, it's just not realistic to believe, even if you don't use the rest, that the village can do anything with the rest. You can't rent it out to anybody. There is food being grown there, so that eliminates lots of industry and lots of. I would just think about that. I'm not suggesting, but you know what to do about that. But I think it's a little misleading to say we're just asking for that. I think you're asking for that land, and realistically, it's that land. I don't see what we could do otherwise with the remainder of that space. The cost is a big deal, even to go. But the education pieces, the all the other stuff, I think, are like, I don't know why we would say no to something like this. It's educational, it's nutrition, it's for people who are aging in place. It's a phenomenal way to become involved in the community. You said intergenerational, but I'm just thinking people who want to meet other people their age, frankly, in addition to all the community groups. I just don't know which of those community groups have already said they're in on this. I only heard none.
We haven't really, no, we,
You think they'll join?
well, we have a good feeling about
You
it.
have a
And
good
again,
feeling.
this is not just us going like that. It's
No.
kind of like we have a sense from various expertise in the community and people who have worked on other gardens before, that this is kind of something that would be very sticky. And for us, I do want to also mention, we've been doing a repair cafe for those of you who are not familiar with it. And I think we just did our 5th or 6th one, and people love it. And they love it because it's skill sharing. So when you talk about intergenerational and you talk about, folks being able to want to show people how they gardened, wherever they came from, what they grow, how they grow it, it's a wonderful thing.
Right, so you have it all in groups, but actually, there was a lot of studies about different immigration groups that come in and are able to bring seeds from their country and plant them, and oftentimes in urban, so they'll come in from Venezuela with something that's grown there that isn't grown anywhere else, and they actually start seeing if, so which I find to be, especially for this community, and I could choose any country, it doesn't matter which one, and aesthetically, I mean, yeah, there's...
I'm sure that there are more people with questions and comments, but I just want to clarify one of the items that Rika just raised as far as this property in particular and how it's been used. And I know that it had been part of a series of village-owned properties near the waterfront. Oh, thank you, Stuart. That we had been renting out, and then we recently renegotiated, and I believe this is the one that that the people who had been renting it, the company that had been renting it, only needed for a period of a couple of months. Is that correct? And while they're continuing to rent some of the other village properties in the neighborhood?
The actual agreement is month to month. They weren't really sure exactly how many months. The other thing that I want to point out about this site is it is the site that our Public Works uses for their spoils and some of their storage, and so that's another issue that we would have to work out.
Okay. It so happens that Paul is here, and he's going to be on next. So, Paul, I know that you are somewhat familiar with this project. Is there anything that you can enlighten us on as far as how Public Works, like addressing the question that Rika just mentioned, is if we've got the garden in this high visibility sidewalk area, which would certainly be a beautification benefit for the neighborhood, is there some viable use for the rest of the space?
Well, I'll answer that by maybe addressing some of the concerns that were raised by the residents here from Barium. We agree it's not as aesthetically pleasing as the other slides you put up there. However, in order to get to a lot of that progress that you referenced, these are the collateral issues that we have. Within 3 square miles, we do have to operate in a pretty tight area. This is one of a village-owned parcel that is near a lot of the work going on, so we try to facilitate that for contractors. It's not all about making money, but the money that is, dare I say, found money in the last 3 years that we've made from this contractor and subcontractor by Metro North would offset 100-fold any village financial commitment to something like this. And that was not, that cash flow was not existent 3 years ago. That said, we try to be cognizant of it, but it is construction and it's a laydown area, and we use it ourselves as a laydown area for a lot of our materials, as the manager referenced. But I believe that that one area will be vacated because that particular subcontractor by Metro North is strictly a sub to the larger project, which they envision finishing within the year. The second contractor that we're allowing to utilize that area is a contractor performing work for Westchester County Department of Public Works and Environmental Facilities, eliminating that siphon, which is the documented source of the odor area in that area. So once that project's finished by the end of this year, that material and laydown area will be vacated by the county contractor, and we will have not only a newly paved joining of roads down there, and then the rest of Snowden, which I'll talk a lot about a little bit later in my presentation, but you will also have elimination of continuous illicit discharges from that sanitary line, as well as the odor that has long overdue mitigated and remediated. So that's going to be a benefit, particularly to Varium and for the surrounding area. So when that's all said and done, this concept could prove to be a nice detail there. And the reason, because I was some time ago involved in some of the concept ideas, the reason we talked about just that little quadrant that was depicted by the red rectangle is because we didn't really give it much thought other than we do need to maintain some space for public works because that's where we operate. And this was also determined when I considered what you might be considering for future use of the other lot where we run our organics facility. So that's another area that, you know, it's hard to do long-term commitments and give up space like that where we utilize it every single day.
Well, I think it's an excellent, you know, repurposing of, you know, of a piece of property that's really sat vacant for as long as I've lived in the village. You know, for all the reasons that you outline, it you know, it's a very positive community building, you know, type of use, and so I'm very excited about that. I just think, just in general, we need to make things more green, and I think that's what's going on here. I certainly understand the challenge of logistical challenge of that Paul was talking about in terms of, you know, places to be able to launch any type of activities related to village infrastructure. But you know, I'd like to do the exploration part. You know, I'd like to see more, get more information, find out what's going on, find out the comings and goings and the timing and all the other stuff. I'm not sure it'll be there next year, but I really like the idea a lot, and I'm very excited about it. And I'm hoping that food security is a big deal, and having a garden like this that's where you're working with community groups that are supporting those people for the food security, I think that's I think that makes a big statement about Ossining, and so I would be in favor of exploring this.
Any other questions and comments at this point? I'll weigh in as well.
Susie, thank you for your presentation. It was a great presentation. Looking at community gardens actually reminds me of when I used to garden with my own grandmother. I actually had the privilege of actually growing up with a garden and eating fresh vegetables. My comment's going to be slightly different. Along the lines of, you know, what Trustee Levin had mentioned, and this is really a question for us all is, I'm in support of community gardens, and if not this location, I would definitely be in support of other locations within the village. But with this particular location, and particularly with our village-owned properties, I want us to be mindful of opportunity cost, right? This is a big piece of parcel. There are many things that we can do with this particular parcel, whether it be continuing along the lines of development, along with our other many parcels. And so, and my thought is that if it does become a community garden, it will always be a community garden. There will, you know, if the village wanted to do something differently with that property, it's stuck, because who would dare propose any other project that would go against a community garden? So please understand, I'm definitely in support of community gardens. I would hope that, you know, this group, if willing, look at many other locations in the village that could be definitely a central location. But I just want to be mindful of not only the cost, the minimal cost, but what is the opportunity cost? What are we giving up if we were to proceed with this project?
May I comment just on that, if I may? Precisely, yes. If it was, I mean, I would hope that it would forever stay a community garden, of course. We would hate to have to invest in anything. But that particular parcel, no one is going to live on it if you're thinking of developing it, because you see how close it is to the train. The other thing I would say is that the reason that spot is so ideal is that the folks that live in the Virium are willing to oversee it on a daily basis, which I think we'd be hard pressed to find. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but this came actually out of a request from Virium to say we're looking at this every day. So it's ideal in that regard. I'm not saying that there probably aren't, but there is a want, as opposed to us going, anyone interested? They want it to happen because they live across the street from it. So it's ideal in that regard. I hear everything else you're saying, but I just did want to comment on that. And
Can I jump in too? So,
Kate, come to the microphone, please.
I can be loud. I'm a teacher. I'm a school teacher.
No, but it's for the television. It's for television.
It's not really optional.
Okay. So, I mean, that particular parcel of land, I mean, I think as we've really kind of stressed, I mean, it is, it's very, people see it, and it's at the waterfront, and right now it looks like a trash dump. It's horrible, and I mean, I understand the village is making some money from it, and there's that piece of it, and the village is also using it for their infrastructure, and I think that we've actually thought about ways that could work, maybe with some fencing, so that you could continue to use it for that. But to address your concern about, I mean, I see your vision, so, you know, we're going to, you know, picket signs, don't tear down our community garden. But Susie, you know, has talked with us about, because she's been thinking about this for a long time. So this would really just be sort of like a seed garden, get it? So we would start with this, and then maybe other places, because there really aren't a lot of options. You know, we haven't actually found other parcels, but with all of the developments, you know, a development, you know, they might want to have, any kind of organization might want to have a community garden on their property, and this could be a model that would grow. So it wouldn't be like this is our only community garden, this is like the village community garden, and we're gonna, you know, keep it. Especially if you want to replace it with a thing like a park or something beautiful, other than, you know, a storage facility.
Kate, I want to, I just want to rein us in a little bit, because I think the ask here is actually pretty modest, because we don't know the viability of it yet. So let me just, and I think philosophically we all recognize that there's great benefits to community gardens. Figuring out exactly when, where, and how to make them happen is what we're at the stage of exploring for this particular location. So let me hear from Trustee Herrera, then I have a couple of questions, and we can get some consensus hopefully on what we're agreeing to for any potential next steps.
Thank you. So first and foremost, I just wanted to say, during my time at Pace University, on my own, I was part of a class at Hilltop Hanover Farm, and I always say this word wrong, but we learned about food foraging and farming, and part of the course you had to spend 10 hours every Saturday for 10 weeks. So you know, personally, I really learned the benefits of just getting my hands dirty and what it means to farm. So I do want to say that it gave me a whole new perspective to actually do it, and to do it with my colleagues and also my peers. I really appreciate the fact that you embraced, I don't know if you meant to, but the food insecurity part of Ossining. We have a lot of poverty here. You see it in our schools, you see it in our community, so much so that we're looking at changing policies and how we even operate because of how expensive it is to live here, and how many populations are marginalized and need a lot of services and equitable opportunity and access. So I really appreciate the fact that, I mean, that's why Ossining has so many food pantries and food banks, now a homeless shelter that's growing, hopefully, to, you know, help more people. So we definitely have a need to be able to embrace the community aspect of a garden, but to also be able to feed people, right, which is great. The eyesore component. I live across the eyesore right now, 200 Main Street, which we're going to get to right now. So, and I drive through many parts of the village, and I walk through many parts of the village that we own that I consider eyesores. So trust me when I say I get it. If I could find a fence, temporarily close it up, I would, which actually bring that up later. But what I feel very confident is that this board is we had a discussion very early on of our new year to get a full list of all our properties and their current use, and also to determine their potential land use. And we're currently not there yet. We haven't actually gotten to that point. And I think that's going to be part of the conversation, regardless of what we do with that piece of land or a different piece of land in the village. And during that land use conversation, when we get to that point, we should be able to answer whether in that particular property the soil is viable for this particular project. Also other questions, right? So we're not there yet. I think that we're getting there. And then what I always do personally, professionally, and even is I usually have a plan B, C, or D. That for whatever reason that property does not work out. What is, can we do a walkthrough of the village and find stuff that we didn't know was behind those 8 bushes? I have a couple of areas that I'd be more than happy to walk with you. Don't know who owns it. Let's find out. That are right in Village Center, but you don't even know are there. So I am fully supportive of this particular project because of its access. Being in the Village Center does matter. One of the challenges I had with the Art Center, which I love, is that there's no sidewalks to get there, no bus stops to get there, right? So you have a target audience, right? So I completely am supportive. However, I can't go past our comprehensive land use process. So I want that process to kind of finish, and then I know it won't go with this timeline, but us viewing all our properties comprehensively will really benefit all residents as a whole with any change or lack thereof that we do with our properties. So yeah, thank you.
So a couple of the questions that I'm hearing at this point are the viability of development in this location, and I'd like to understand that. It is close to the train tracks. It is in a flood zone. What could be developed there? And it is one of a number of village properties, and the last time we had a list created of village-owned properties was, I believe, 2015 was the last time one was presented. You have a current one. Okay, great. So I'm glad that we're on a path for that. So then my question, and I think we all agree that having a community garden that's walkable to our downtown is something that we all can get behind, and we love that whole piece of the concept. And I do recognize that in this location there are particular interested people across the street who are really be supportive of its success because it's certainly preferable to what's there right now. I absolutely get that, and it is a neighborhood that is largely industrial, but is zoned to be more mixed, and we'd like to see some greater diversity in what is down there to be, because we do have a park, we do have some residents, we do have some businesses, but the businesses tend to be very industrial. So this could be helpful in this transitional neighborhood. What is involved with the soil testing? Is it a very expensive venture? Does it require a lot of resources? Or is it a matter of we just, we got the engineer raising his hand there, soil testing? You want? Yeah. If you already know the answer to that, that'd be great, because I have no idea what soil testing means.
I think it might be premature to even start talking about that, because you don't really know the scope, and you're going to test the scope, and not that I've thought about it too much, but if we use the spoils, which is clean fill from a lot of our construction opportunities, to build up the bed before you put a topsoil layer on there, you can have some, easy transfer of the material over there, and testing that material is incidental in the scheme of the cost.
Okay.
And then I think they're more inclined to spend their money on testing their imported soil that they want to grow their produce within. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what would be a logical next step? It sounds like you have an inventory of village-owned property, and do we understand the viability of this particular one? Would that be a next logical step?
So the answer to that is yes. I do have a current list. We did put it on a map. I'm trying to find a GIS program that I can put it on so it looks a little more professional. But I do want to say that Susie and I had a very long conversation about this property and about other properties as well, and why this one may work or not work. And I just wanted to throw out some of my ideas on here. Is I don't think that it's a problem to look and see if it's viable to do it on this site, because when we look at our that whole revitalization of that whole area, we're going to be looking at how everything fits together. And one of the things that's being proposed for that site is a little bit of extra parking, which could help some of our restaurants on Westerly. And there's just some other ideas for what that property could be that would be really pretty complementary to what they're doing. I totally agree that we should look at the site to see what could be built there. But I really think that all you're asking for at this point is, would it be okay to start exploring this as an option? And please correct me if I'm wrong, but, and to talk about it as just trying to find a community garden within the village, and talking about that at Earth Day. Is that correct, or?
I think what we need to know is whether or not this is a feasible site. And even if we did soil testing, and you guys still are undecided about it, we don't really have next steps until you're okay with our next steps, which would be that one. Oops, that one. So we kind of need to get a sense, will we have access to water? I mean, so we need that full understanding, because after that, we could sit there and figure out, okay, well, this is going to cost this much, and this is how long it's going to take. We could figure out how we might fund this outside of village, village costs. But for us to move forward with it, we would need to really understand these things. So it is above and beyond just the soil. I mean, yes, we could do the soil test to satisfy everyone, because we could find out that it's not viable. Or maybe the other option is, or maybe it's not viable and we just lay down cement, because that's inexpensive, right? And then we just start all over. I mean, there are options here. I guess the question would be, we should do the soil test and figure it out, find out what's next from there. But then I guess we'd come back to the board going, okay, soil test, let's say it came back great. What then? Where are we at?
I do think that there's a lot of steps that we have to go through before you can ever make a decision on what you want to do.
So, yeah.
One being the use of the property. Second, what could we do there as far as, what is the soil composition there? Where is the water? What are other things that are happening around it?
Do we have agreement that we're interested in exploring the viability of what this property may be used for, and if this is a good option for using the property in this way?
I do want to explore it for this particular purpose, but back to my original point, I'm using the word comprehensive because we're very piecemeal when it comes to projects in the village, and we're trying to really move together when it comes to our properties and our vision. So I do need more than an hour to kind of process the whole thing. Maybe I can meet with Green Ossining and their team, and come to a meeting, take a walk. I do need more than an hour to kind of just say yes overall. Do some more homework and get some more information. But to answer your original question, I would like us to move forward with all other properties to investigate when it comes to their uses and soil testing and any other potential testing or evaluations that should be done on those sites.
Susie, did you want to be able to say something at Earth Day? That was part of the reason why. So how much? You're not getting a commitment that anything's happening in this location anyway. So are you looking at Earth Day to just be able to say, hey, look, we've begun conversations with the village about the potential for having a community garden that's walkable to the village center and to people who live in the heart of Ossining. And, please let us know if you would be interested in learning more about this and potentially participating. Is that all? Is that the only commitment that you want? Because I think I'm hearing that.
I would like
exactly
that.
When and where it happens is TBD.
Yes. I would like to do that. I, of course, would like to feel much more confident that we've all agreed to a location. But, and I'd also like to do the soil test, because it seems to me that if we don't do the soil test, we'll never know. We could find out, as I said, that the soil, and we have to figure out our options after that.
Okay.
So it seems like something we ought to do.
So
no
I
matter
think
what.
I think operationally some things need to be figured out by our staff, and we also are, as a board, going to be looking at all of the properties in the village, all the village-owned properties, and our comprehensive plan, and how it might be updated. So there's some big picture questions here, but then there's some operational, in that is some operational work to be done so that we can know what we're dealing with in this location, because there's some obvious questions to ask about the viability for this particular location in the big picture scheme of things. But we do have a really big agenda ahead of us. Sachin, what? Yep.
As the board is making that decision, I just want to say, I mean, there is the viability component because there are probably other properties out there as well. But look at it from a visibility perspective as well. And look at it from the riverfront revitalization perspective. So when you factor all these things in, it makes a lot more economic sense, because you have to look at it not just from a cost value, you have to look at it from a growth value of where Ossining is going in the next decade to come. So just be mindful of that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Did you need to say something else?
Yeah, so it's always hard to sit here because it's confusing as to what you're asking for. I mean, when people come and ask for money, that's very easy because we have a discussion about money. So I'm hearing like really mixed things here. Like, I don't know if you're walking away knowing what your next steps are, because I don't know what your next steps are based on this conversation.
We said a soil test. We'd like to have the soil test done. That's for you guys to decide whether that's something you want to agree to. And we'd like to talk about it at Earth Day and say this is something that we're working on the village with.
This is what I'm hearing. Definitely you can talk about it at Earth Day. The village is interested in exploring with Green Ossining how we can have a community garden that's walkable for people.
In the downtown, yeah.
Yes, that's walkable for the most dense part of our community. As far as what exactly are the next steps to determining this location or other locations, we're going to have our staff look into how we should best do that, and you guys are going to come back with a recommendation for us. And it'll also be discussed in the larger picture of all of our village properties. Have I encompassed most of the concerns? So we are very much supportive of the concept, and we understand the benefits of this potential location, and we need to understand the viability of this potential location in the larger context of the village properties in the comp plan. We're good. We can all get behind that. That's okay. Good. Thank you very much, Susie, Kate, Sachin, John. Appreciate all of your time. And I see that we have a couple of big topics coming up that are related to Paul Fraioli.
Definitely.
Yes, I'm very excited to have our village engineer, Paul Fraioli, here to talk about some of the programs that are going on this summer, talk about roads and the different items that are on our agenda that I think the public will be interested in hearing about. So I'm just going to turn it over to Paul, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Debbie. So picking up on that introduction, it kind of worked out well with what Debbie asked Andy and I to cover, and the changing of the schedule. If you saw the original schedule, Andy and I were going to be in front of you next month, but due to a shift, we took this month. So some things were done in haste here, but hopefully we covered everything we wanted, which was basically the larger, more visible projects that are going on in the village of Ossining's Department of Public Works, from an operation budget perspective and capital perspective. However, because we're only in front of you those 2 times a year officially to present more overview of what we're doing versus anything specific that we might be in front of you, I took the opportunity to kind of give an overview of really what goes on there for the benefit of everybody else in the public that doesn't know it as intimately as you all here. So that said, I don't have any embedded videos. You don't have Andy tonight, so that's the 2 immediate things I need to get out of the way is drawbacks, but moving forward. So this is our update, and coincidentally, again, this date really coincides with the end of the first quarter, so I'm going to talk about some budget perspectives too. So in the Department of Public Works, as you know, we have myself and Andrew Teese as the 2 administrators of that department. we cross over and cross train a lot, so we work very well together. And in our Department of Public Works, we have 60 exactly civil service members that make up our subordinate staff in that department, from the office all the way to the other departments you see listed there. A couple things I want to note on this slide. I don't have everything written that I'm going to say. I have some notes on my copy here. As far as the 60 CSEA members, from a budget perspective, that's actually a reduction. We have 4 office staff members, but some time ago when I took over, we had 5. So that's a reduction of 1. The others stayed the same until you get to the sanitation department. There's 11 people out there on a regular basis in the sanitation crew. If you remember, not that many years ago, when our schedule was changed around and our recycles really started to ramp up and kick it into gear, we eliminated a route and distributed that work to another route. So we've actually eliminated 3 employees from the budget in the sanitation department. And the last one being the water distribution department down below. We offset some of the increases in the filter plant with the reduction of 4 people where there used to be 10 in the water distribution. We took 2 of those staff members and put them to the plant, so now we have 7 people full-time in the plant. But that's still a net reduction of 2 in the water department. So we are doing more with less, simply put. So tonight we're going to cover some comments on the operating budget, which I've already started to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the administration that we do for non-village projects, briefly, very briefly. And then we're going to talk about the big stuff that Debbie really wanted to cover here, which is the DPW administered capital projects. And when we finish up, we'll take some questions and comments. So, end of the first quarter highlights. In every one of our lines, with the exception of one, which is related to snow and storm response, which is a minor exceedance of the budget, we are at or below all the projected expenditures at this point in all 3 of the funds that we administer, the general, the water, and the sewer funds, relative to DPW activities out of those funds. The folks in the office, shown below, are largely responsible for a lot of the stuff that goes on that's not in the field, but I did want to point it out here because there's some onerous tasks here. But the village's public works has the reputation it does in our circles with our other regulators because they do all these things very well. And it's pretty extensive, but I would like to read it because it's important. The organic transfer station report that we send to the DEC, the solid waste report that we send to the Department of Environmental Facilities down at the county, the annual water quality report that folks get in the mail that it's a responsibility or a requirement of the Department of Health from the county will be mailed out in May as it is every year. Read it. There's some real good stuff in there. Even if you're not a technical or drinking water type person, you should know what you're getting when you turn your faucet on or take your shower. It's neat and very informative. Sanitary collection and pump station reports that we send to the county DEF every year is something that is not an easy task, and it's also the collection of a bunch of stuff that we do in the field that they want to see every year as a regulator. And lastly, which is kind of new to our office because we used to do this with planning, but now MS4 reports are all going to be run out of Public Works, and that's what we submit to the DEC every year. If you remember, MS4 is an acronym for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Systems, and that is basically our stormwater activities that we do, the drainage, the catch basin cleaning, improvements to piping and treatment prior to stormwater being introduced to a receiving body, all under Phase 2 regulations that were set forth about 12 years ago by the DEC for communities of 100,000 or less, we being one of them. As far as an operating budget is concerned, I showed you that earlier staffing document, so we consider ourselves fully staffed. We are not missing anybody. Of course, we have our absences and our injuries here and there, but we consider the department fully staffed. And I put this picture up here also to remind me that we have a the ability, if you all, I'll just throw this in because it came late, but Debbie sent out that email earlier about the report that showed the increase in the Hispanic community in the last census, increasing from 20, and you can help me out if you remember the number, but between 20 plus or minus % up to over 40% within the village of Ossining since the last census. So that's a tremendous increase. And we experience that every day between contractors that we deal with and folks that come to the counter and folks that call in. So interacting with them, with the ladies who have the ability to speak multiple languages, including Spanish and dialects, Portuguese, and English as well, is a big asset. And they all have that. Some better than others, but all of them can hold their own. So that's about all I want to talk about as far as administrative and the budget, but I do want to talk about some outliers because I know this is probably going to be a question that comes to me when I finish anyway. So I'm going to tell you what the outliers were in this first quarter. It was the storm and the requirements of the storms that we had in February and March. We had 24-hour response. Here you see us, one of our subcontractor annual bidders in the middle of the night, right after all those winds, cutting a tree down that was inevitably going to fall on its own anyway with a boom. And this was probably taken sometime around midnight. So that just shows the response and the commitment of the folks. The cleanup the next day that we did with some coordination that PD was doing with the Con Ed liaison, bringing us to areas that, you know, were not deemed dead, but were eventually deemed dead. We were in there right after them. One of the big advantages I think that the Village of Ossining had, in addition to that liaison and the coordination with Con Ed, that maybe made us a little like a step ahead of some other communities, was we did a lot of our own tree work and cleanup work and access work for a lot of the Con Ed crews to get in there and do their due, because you know, they had to bring in outside tree contractors, and they weren't very well coordinated, quite frankly, with the Con Ed crews. And if there was not a tree contractor coordinated to come in and do this, I think that people on Iroquois and the area up in Indian Village might still be waiting for power. That's how it feels anyway. And here you see one of our larger tree falls that fell into the road on Callum, and our subcontracted tree contractors working along with the village. And I'd put this in here to show you the benefit of having some of the equipment that you pay for and commit every year. This is our fairly new loader a few years back with an attachment to lift heavy items such as this, and that really helped us respond to get these roads open and cleared and all the sidewalks cleared, because the day the kids were ready to go back to school, there was nothing left on the road. So the guys really did a nice job with this particular storm. I want to talk about in the operating budget in this first quarter some of the advantages of sitting with the manager's office and the police department and everybody else involved with OEM with doing snow emergency declarations and how we prepare for snow now versus maybe some years ago, and the budget impacts and these items listed here. The budget impact is maybe we spent some capital expenditures on these systems here that we have on a couple of our trucks now, but it's really incidental when you look at the intangible, the road condition. This delays it actually delayed the guys having to come in and pay for overtime, because the snow accumulation on the road was definitely stalled by this pre-wetting operation that you see in this upper right-hand corner. A lot of that operation takes away from the need to do this operation in the smaller picture, which is snow removal in our downtown area. That's also an advantage of having an emergency snow declaration. A lot of this removal from the middle of the road and the buildup doesn't really have to happen if we can push it back to the curb when the cars are out of the way from the beginning. So that's another big reason. So that definitely gives us a return on our investment, not only for this type of material here, but the very limited labor investment associated with establishing and implementing a snow emergency, because we don't get caught up doing a lot of this, which is orders of magnitude more costly than some of that upfront administrative work. And then it also helps us with the documentation, because everybody's in the loop. And we have time cards, and we document when people come and when they go and all our materials. And inevitably, in instances like this, they have potential for reimbursement if the governor makes that declaration, and we're able to recoup some funds, which we've done successfully in the past in issues like this. And that's a nice offset that comes back in as a revenue. I want to jump a little bit on what the department does within our town IMA, and this is the only slide for that, so I'll be very brief. In the town, we're looking to help them construct a retaining wall on Old Albany Post Road, similar to this one, which we did when we did the extension of Old Albany Post Road a year or two ago on that dead end. If anybody's ever took that out to the old Croton Bridge there at the dead end that goes into Newcastle. This is a very successful project here, also over 75% FEMA funded. this a wall similar to this, the town is looking to replace along the S turn at Old Albany Post Road, if you know where that is, if you leave out towards Newcastle over there. We are this year going to do design documents for McCarthy Drive rehabilitation. It's more than just paving the road. We're going to do extensive drainage improvements over there and make that a formidable road versus what it is now, which is basically which is a driveway which became a road. And the stormwater work that we do there is going to have benefits not only in the town but also in the receiving streams in the village, more specifically off of Cedar Lane. So this has a benefit to us as well. The water main work's ongoing. It started on Gordon Avenue and we'll finish that next year. And the Stormytown Road project will be bid out later this year as well into next year. And then we're also going to close out, because we did collectively with them, if you remember, their LED projects. Contractor went away for a while, but he should be back in soon to finish North State Road decorative lighting, and then they will be done, and so will we. And we've reached substantial completion, but as an aside, to make it a village slide, our LED project still has not paid a penny out towards the contractor because we haven't reached that substantial completion agreement yet with the village and the contractor. So any discussions about having to extend that that debt service agreement we had with them is a moot point now, because we have saved enough already on our NYPA bills in the last 2 years to already pay for the first 2 years of payment. So we're looking good there. A project that is taking place in the village that is not ours, that I referenced earlier when we were talking about the garden, is Westchester County's elimination of the sewerage system siphon on the bottom of Snowden Avenue into Water Street. This is the ongoing work right now, where there used to be the playground, and there will be a playground again when they're done. But this is where the basically large part of the gravity line went through, and this cone is located on Central Avenue here. The bottom of Broadway, where it comes into Water Street. This is a pic that I had on my computer from last year, one of the multiple times that the siphon surcharged with some of the bicarbonate solution that they add to the pump stations, which the county has to come and clean them every time that happens. In addition to this happening, they used to get significant surcharging of raw sewerage directly into the Hudson, which was that is a paramount reason to do what they're doing, and really the driving reason why they undertook this project. It is secondary to the odor mitigation. That is going to be a secondary benefit of this project. They are working on there now. They anticipate finishing this year. And as part of this project, because we work so closely with the county to determine its scope, and also are working very closely with the county's contractor vis-a-vis the mobilization area that we discussed earlier, the county is going to pave the entire intersection here and also pave all of Snowden Avenue up to Matilda, where we stopped last year when we paved it. So that'll be add nice continuity to that area, and that's a major thoroughfare for folks going to the train, so they're going to enjoy a nicer ride all the way to the bottom, and hopefully in the summer with very little odor if they're driving with the windows down. Some of the in-house projects that we are going to do this year are similar to this one, which was the end of last year prior to the paving of Linden. With no outside contractor help, we completely excavated and rebuilt a new ceiling to the culvert on Lower Linden Avenue over here on Glen Street and Lower Linden, if you know where that is. That was actually collapsing. It was old cobblestone and really a hodgepodge over a period of probably 50 years of culvert that was there. We actually ripped it all apart and brought in structural steel and poured a concrete decking and then paved over it. So that's a nice transition there, and definitely is going to add to the life of that road versus paving over what was there. The large project that they're going to start this week, we just received the materials for it delivered today, is in conjunction with and in advance of the Snowden paving. The guys are going to be out there replacing all the storm water piping from Matilda all the way down to Snowden to make sure that there's a suitable subbase when they fix all that pipe, which is probably 75% collapsed right now, and is the reason for a large settling that you have going on next to that parking for Snowden Park, if you ever go down in that area and see that. So we do a lot of projects like this, but this was the nicest picture I had, so I'll use that one. Now we're going to get into the 2018 capital projects. Remember, this is not inclusive of anything in the potable water treatment plant design that we're doing right now, or any of the miscellaneous village building improvements that are considered capital expenditures. The first one that we're in the design phase for 2018, and we're going to do construction in 2019, is the interior renovation and the elevator installation at the John Paul Rodriguez Ossining Operations Center. I know everybody knows where that is, but for the public, that is a DPW operation off of 9A South, just south of 134. We're going to make this this building completely ADA accessible with that elevator, and the scope that was the original scope when we first started talking about this 3 or 4 years ago. That scope has increased tremendously. We went over that when we presented with the consultants last time here, and we're after meeting with the manager and her vision of what she wanted that office to provide as far as customer centric. We've basically flip-flopped the DPW operation and the planning building operations for the town and village. So that second mention is going to come down to the first floor where you do have most of the activity, and DPW operation is going to go up to the second floor. In addition, we're going to put a very large conference area over here to house spillover meetings that you may want to house up there, but primarily for larger planning and zoning meetings as well, and all the technology to go along with it. So we're going to do things like that, and then there's a lot of collateral work, since we're in there ripping everything apart, that we're going to do in this main front building, including central garage, and make that able to be managed a little better and take on a little more work and bring things from outside in so we can increase the parking on the outside. So those were good meetings to have prior to issuing the contract, and that's what we said we'd do last time, and that's where we stand right now, and the contract has been issued, and we are in design phases. They're actually coming out Monday to do some baseline surveying, so they have all their details, architectural details in place before they start doing any mechanical work. The other big capital project that is within the road and you all know about is, because we just opened it up and you voted on it last legislative meeting, was the Broadway Bridge Rehabilitation Project. Probably in early April, we're going to have our kickoff meeting, but the contractor has already been issued his notice to proceed. This is just a picture I took of concrete being pumped down to the Kilbrook Trail last year, or a couple of years ago, when they were working on that project. But this is the main thoroughfare that I wanted to show that is going to be blocked off a large part of the late spring and probably most of the summer when they do this rehabilitation. So detours will be in place. Pedestrian detours are not that going to be that significantly impacted, because you can hop over the aqueduct right around the corner over here, but it's really going to be the vehicular traffic and the bus route that's going to be impacted. But the school is in the loop, and they're going to make the accommodations as necessary. The county bus does not go through this way, so it's really going to be locals just getting used to it. And when we're done, it's going to be a really nice aesthetic, as you know. That's going to take Mr. Faucher's original work and Mr. Grant's original design and restore it back to its earlier beauty. And hopefully this is the visual that you get when you walk up the trail at the end of this summer. That's from a postcard from, I don't know where I pulled that from, but I believe that's from a postcard from the 50s or the 60s that I found on the internet. And then the other main project that's going to really be most visible to the public is road paving projects. I included this picture here because it's more than paving. It's actual thermoplastic or painting, depending on what we decide to do on the particular roads. It's also curb work and all that drainage work, like I talked about on Snowden, that we do with the funds that are made available in this project. So it's really right-of-way work. But I'm estimating that about $700,000 of the estimated $900 to $1 million that is now in the kitty from your commitment, CHIPS money, and carryover from 16 and 17 capital projects, $700,000 of that is going to be used for paving proper. So that we're hope to get a lot of work done, and I'm going to show you what we'd like to get done this summer and into the fall. If you remember when we first talked about the paving scope at the end of 17, the list that was provided and included in the 2018 budget narrative, which was completed in 17, was Lower Linden, Glen, Sherman, Snowden, and Waller. So that was completed in 17. In 18, we wanted to go into Camp Woods, Pugsley Place, Ryder, and then a lot of little roads that we didn't list in the narrative, but some areas like Narragansett and some of the areas like off of Sunset and what have you. However, Con Ed, basically, even though I didn't list their name here, it is them, has led us to shift in scope. So in addition to the balance of Snowden, which is going to be paid by the county, this summer we also we have to do something on Camp Woods, even though the Con Ed's really not completely committed to how far they're going to go along and what the area disturbance is going to be on Camp Woods. We need to do a section of Camp Woods, at least to hold people over, because particularly in front of Independent Hose, it's really, really bad. And just trust me, you don't even have to drive there. It's not good. So we're going to maybe do something this summer if Con Ed isn't in there. Con Ed did call for the Code 53, but they've done that before and false started on us, and they actually never came in and did the work. So that's to be determined. Amawalk Court off of Ramapo has an old trench in it, and a lot of this area in here is dilapidated all around the curbs, and it's going to be something that we need to address. And I listed this here because of its proximity to Camp Woods, because this is going to be more of a quick fix versus a full mill. Rockledge Avenue from South Highland here, you see highlighted in green, to the intersection is in very bad shape. This is going to be a tough project because not only its width, but the logistics, the traffic, and the maintenance and protection of traffic during this is going to be tough to do. We might end up doing this on an off hour, and we will not disturb to significantly the people's accessibility to the shopping or CVS on either side of the road. And we're going to repaint everything, probably with thermoplastic, and make this area a lot nicer and safer to travel through right now, because the road is in really bad shape here. It's not shown here highlighted, but we will also include the intersection here, which is also in pretty bad shape, and that will go nicely with all the new ADA drop curbs that we put on all these sections over here when we did that work a couple of years back. Broad Avenue is a road we talked about for a long time. The road isn't in terrible shape, but it is concrete, and it is a pretty rough ride. So this, again, will not be a candidate for milling, but we are going to have to do some concrete, give some attention to that concrete to put a true and level course on there before we put the top course. So there is some significant prep work, and I think that will make for a lot nicer thoroughfare down into the village, in this section of the village from Highland Avenue, which a lot of people do take when we do that. And we look to take that from South Highland out to State and change what was concrete and turn that into blacktop. Lafayette Avenue, just up the way, is Maurice. We did that a couple of years ago when we did fix the curbs and the sidewalks. This is its parallel street off of Spring over here down to Nelson Park. You know, it's a pretty heavily traveled road, particularly for people that live around this corridor over here, because it's the main exit over here, and this road is in pretty tough shape too, so we want to address that. Lower Main, most people avoid this section. You really don't need to go in there unless you're going to one of these buildings here, but this is a really quick fix. It's this area over here again is concrete, so this is an area that we can do with an overlay with some touch up to the concrete in advance of the overlay, and I think that will make for a nicer ride down to some of the activity bustling down here, and also for these, quite frankly, these people that live right here deserve to have what they deserve. So we're looking to give that to them. So we'll go, it'll be a nice match for Secor Road, which is in pretty good shape. Underhill Road down to M. Wilton and Walden from its intersection with Knoll Drive over here. We're still determining exactly what we're going to do here. If you remember some years ago, we came through and put a skim coat on here, really at the behest of the police department, because there were so many accidents happening here when it was getting wet because of the hill. And again, quite frankly, a lot of people travel at a high rate of speed over here because this is a main corridor to the train station, and we were having a lot of issues with collisions at the bottom of the hill at the stop sign over here because people having a hard time stopping. So that coat that we put on there that added some grit to the surface really did help a lot. But now the road needs to be addressed. So this might be a nominal mill, and then an overlay, and then a coat on top of that. So we're going to do whatever is safest is the end result there, but that will all be included in our scope. A little section of John Street over here, if you ever make the cut through over here to Yale, this section over here is all dilapidated, so we're probably going to pick this up, and since we're here, we're probably going to do an overlay of the concrete section over here, just to make continuity with the two with the rest of the road. Again, another major cut through, so it's one of those areas where you get a lot of complaints. And then there's, again, depending on the budget and depending how much of that difference between what I showed and the at the end of the day what the total funds committed to paving are, we might do some additional work. So I just put these on here just to show you where my mindset is. There's sections of Sherwood that we're looking to address, particularly the lower section, the northern section near Pine, and then Aqueduct Street, which had significant Con Ed work on it. But Con Ed's restoration actually wasn't that bad there, so I'm not sure what I want to do there. But that's kind of where we're at with the roads. My last slide, regardless of how I stated this, this is really for the public's education. We will always take calls from the public and always pass on calls and complaints from the public. And we understand that it's nicer to call your local representatives for those complaints. But specifically for Highland Avenue, for its full length in the village limits, Route 134, also known as Dale Avenue, to the town limit near Sassy's Deli, and Route 133 Croton Avenue to the town limits under 9A by Donna Lane. Those are all state roads. And because they're state roads, they're supposed to be maintained by the state. Sometimes we help out where we have to, if there's something that's egregious there. But more often than not, we've been really ramping up our lines of communication with the state and having them come in there to address potholes. The unfortunate part is they don't give any indication that they have any funding or engineered plans to proceed with what I believe is really needed there, which is full road reclamation and repaving. So that's something that we're going to continue to push for, but right now we're staying on top of the state to address their potholes and any trench restoration follow up with Con Ed when they come in and do that work. So again, we'll be back here, and I said we because I think Andy will be with me next time we come in here. I think we're scheduled for September to do, which is right around the end of the third quarter, so we'll have a really good handle on the end of the third quarter, and it'll be a good time to meet with you all in advance of coming in to do our budget presentation. And we'll review where we stand there and also the status of everything we talked about tonight. But what if you notice, what we left off in tonight's presentation was everything water and some building upgrades. So we have the potable water design, we have the distribution system operations, because we are doing distribution work as well, not just in the town. We're doing it in the village. We'll talk about the balance in that fund also, and then some of the larger building upgrades that are taking place now. I know Andy's been pricing out stuff for the police station HVAC. We submitted a couple of things to consider on 200 Main, and then we do our other building work here. So that's what we'll be in there to talk about next time we're here. So I'll open it up to comments and questions now.
So, I just have one question. First of all, thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough. I'm happy to see all the great work that our employees do here in the village. It's definitely appreciated, and it definitely shows members of our communities, the great guys and the great work that they do to ensure that things are taken care of.
Thank you.
With respect to the state responsibility and state roads, who should our constituents call to kind of highlight particular issues? And I want to speak to Route 9, right there as you are leaving Landmark Diner, that kind of intersection. There's a big dip that if you don't know where that pothole is, you're messing up your car every single time. So, I mean, you're talking about something egregious. I mean, I'm surprised you haven't gotten 100 calls on that one dip, because you really don't know it's there. So who should people contact if they're not contacting you or the village?
The state DOT office that takes care of maintenance is in Millwood. However, the public line that people are going to get is the state DOT office in Somers. Well, I'm sorry I don't have the number with me here, but if they look up the Katona. The Katona office off of Route 100 of the state DOT is where their resident engineer and their permit office exists, and that's an office that they would call. That's parallel to calling our office at the operations center if it was a village road.
Okay.
However, I would request that people also call us and the police department on an off hour, because the police also have the DOT.
Okay.
That's something that we really are working hard. I speak to Kevin about it often to make sure that the police know when the people call on a state road that they can call us, but they should also call the state. And it means a lot when the police call the state versus just us during the day after the fact on an off-hour call. So, we're all collectively pouncing on the state to hopefully keep. They had a little head of steam. I don't know if you noticed, but they were in here doing pothole restoration the last couple of weeks, which is something I don't want to call it an anomaly, but it's something that they need to.
Hopefully they get that one at the right there on 9, because it messes your car up.
They got the one approaching Van Cortlandt, I noticed, when I ran over it and didn't
After.
create a problem for my vehicle. More comments and questions for Paul?
I just wanted to also echo that. Thank you so much. I'm glad you brought up the reporting of where our actual residents can go and make these calls. At some point, not tonight, I do want to have a conversation. We've always encouraged people, you see it and report it, kind of like in New York City. But at some point, we need a streamlined process where they don't have to call the state, then DPW, then OPD, then that's three or more departments at some point, whether it's us or whether it's suggesting a better system for the state. In the meantime, I'll be more than happy. I'll post it on my Facebook, and I'll email it to you guys. The picture, the name, the email, and the address of our DOT person that covers this area, and their public number as well. But to echo Paul, please make sure you let the village know, because don't assume that we always know. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have comments and questions. So, first of all, great job during the storm. The size of those trees are huge. I mean, you look at you need multi-people and multi-everything. They're just huge, and they fall across the size of entire roads. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Just made some, not in any special order. So when you showed us the roads, when you showed us the roads and people will look it up, is that the order that those roads are being approached? Is that sort of a list of this is the first and this is the second, more or less? Because as you said, Camp Woods is connected to another piece that you may not have done as a first piece, but if it's connected, it seems silly to jump around like popcorn all over this village. So is that now public information to say 1, 2, 3, 4, or at least some sort of an order, even though there are no dates attached that people can look at?
No, good question. There was no thought process to the order of the presentation. That's how I uploaded them into the system, into the PowerPoint presentation. The means and methods is really going to be coordinated with the annual bid contractor when we do that. I can tell you in advance, because we have talked about it a little already. We're probably going to get on the concrete roads first, because they don't really require milling. So that can be an earlier project once the plants open up and the paving season commences. The other roads that require the milling, we like to do all the milling first, and put the appropriate measures in there so people don't bottom out with castings and stuff like that. Then we have to give a lot of the stuff we do in-house in advance of coming through with the final course. We have to give that some time, like raising castings for sewer and water castings that are in the road, and then some curb work restoration, and then we'll go in and pave. So, those will be the second roads, which were the roads on there that are blacktop. So, like those little cul-de-sacs and what have you.
So, I'm sorry.
Let me build off that, though, and I should have said this. Once we start our process, there is more than enough notification, particularly to the surrounding people. On the larger roads, we've rented, and we'll probably do it again, the message boards, alerting people to, hey, we're going to, it won't be us in this instance, but on Snowden Avenue, when the contractor comes in, expect delays, construction ahead, and all the maintenance and protection of traffic measures that we could put in place for the commuters. We also go and do a windshield wiper campaign. Typically we go to some, windshield wipers and put on some postings. People are parked in the areas that we're going to be paving here, and thank you in advance for your patience and cooperation. Abide by all parking restrictions, because we do restrict parking in large areas for not just where we're going to be milling and paving, but where we're mobilizing as well in the surrounding areas. So it's very inconvenient for the people in the immediate area of a lot of that operation. But again, the end result, they're more than happy with. So, you know, very few complaints when we do things like that because everybody has knowledge of the big picture.
Okay, so I'm going to make a suggestion. We have a better website. So I'm going to beg to differ on the communication aspect. We know where people live. We know where we're going to do stuff. So there should be a list or something that says this is the sequence, even if it doesn't say June 1, this road, okay? Because then people get disappointed if it's not June 1. And I get that, but there's got to be some sort of a list. We've been asking for it for like a couple of years in this group. I'm not, actually, Quantel's like, yeah, we need some sort of a list. People have to know where they are. Maybe you want to put up next month when you know more, but you got to put it up. It's been a couple of years that a list has been asked for, which is what I thought actually. I was very excited because I said, oh, okay, you thought that too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So now we have this, which is great. And you can put that. There's so much room on the website to say this is sort of the applied order. You could also you do the windshield, but you could also send to that community of that surrounding area, because people do have a plan of how they go to work in the morning or get their kids in the afternoon or whatever it is, and now they've got to figure out how to get around. So I think there can be a better job of the businesses in that community saying, like, for the month of, for the 3 weeks of. I actually think it shows up your department as doing a lot of amazing work, but people don't know when it starts and they don't know. That's what happened, by the way, with Con Ed. When are they ending? We got a lot of calls. So when are they done with this? When are they done? And you know my pet peeve, that people do not know. So thank you for pointing out the state roads. Do we have any county roads? Or is it just state and
Yeah,
village?
there's portions of Pleasantville Road is a county road. We maintain that, but we also get some give back on snow and ice from them every 5 years. I think that's renewable.
So that's information for us, but from a consumer and a public, and I'm looking at you because I'm not sure whose it is. You've got a part of the website, you have Jamie running it, but there really should be an information about how this stuff works, what the average time is, about what to expect with updates. Update it, people know. I just think the communication, people, when I ran for trustee, 2 things. I've said this 100 times: running decent water and roads. That's it. If you get that done, you're doing a good job as a trustee. I'm considering I'm not a high bar, but frankly, we're not meeting that bar because the roads are really in bad shape for a whole lot of reasons. I get it, but the communication is one of the more aggravating pieces of it. A ditch is a ditch, but not knowing when it's fixed. So I would appreciate the communication. About how to do that. The staffing, may I go back to the beginning of you don't have to do that. You have internships available in any of these departments that you guys have? It wasn't up there. You're fully staffed, you have this, you have that, but I didn't see, are there internships
I can tell
available for?
what we typically do, and we'll probably look to do this summer. What we refer to more as an internship, we typically do at our filtration facility, because it's a little more technical and there's actual, some applied science there from someone that's in the STEM fields, whether it's late high school or our undergraduate work. So that's worked successfully the last 5 years. We usually take 2 students.
Okay.
We don't have
But
anybody.
I didn't see that listed anywhere. Like, how do people apply? Because now is when the college and high school.
Yeah.
Right, it's a time. So how do they, people are watching, so how do people apply? If you could, I don't need an answer, frankly, unless you have it, but I would appreciate, by the way, village manager, for all of our departments, to know if there are opportunities for people to have internships. I know you do them.
Yep, and the
I
second
just
one
wish I
is
could find them and how they're done, so.
the second one is a little more labor oriented, and what we imagined or envisioned for that type of employment with the Public Works Department is possibly doing something collectively with Riverkeeper and some stenciling work on the catch basins throughout the village. So, but that is kind of fresh, and we really haven't scoped that yet. So I haven't solicited we budgeted it in the budget, but we haven't really talked about soliciting it. And that we have backlog of people of applications that are in, and we usually try to bring in different people each summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
More questions and comments?
Yeah, I just want to know when you're going to do Camp Woods, that's all.
That is definitely the most asked about roadway, yes.
Two tires blown out, I'm just saying.
I could tell you Camp Woods,
400
Well, I know that Con Ed came in and they did the kind of the Ryder Road piece.
Camp
So,
Woods
yeah,
was
and
originally told to us, we're going to go down Ryder, touch into Narragansett, and part of Camp Woods, and we're done. So we thought they were done, and we said we're going to pave it last year. When we called for the mark out, they said we're not done.
Yeah,
We're
I
going to
know.
continue to go down to Croton Avenue this year. When I sent in the email to confirm our new list, they sent it back and said 2019 for Camp Woods. So until I get it, and they really don't have a clear answer because engineering saying 2019, but gas services called for a mark out for Camp Woods, which is usually precedes work. So I'm working on it.
You talked about doing something, which is, I guess,
And
some sort of
Pugsley.
temporary Band-Aid. You're not going to do a full milling and drainage and
Yeah,
restoration.
I-
That will have to come after the 2019.
We don't
kind
wanna
of
put
work, but
good
you
money to
can't
bad,
leave
yeah.
it as is what you're saying. So you're going to
Yeah,
do
well-
some temporary improvement, but not
Figure
not
something out,
not
yeah.
what really needs to happen. Okay.
I think I'm staying up.
Thank you for all your efforts, really.
Thank you.
Um, great, and as somebody who uses that John Street cut through, I didn't even text you. I can't tell you every single morning that I drive through there, I think, oh, I should just text the village right now and say this is awful. But then I
Texting and driving.
well, talk to text. I couldn't get anything done if I couldn't do that. But anyway, I'm very glad to see that on the list. I know we all have our own roadways that we frequent and are pleased to see when they get done and are plagued by. Are we going to transition this into, you mentioned the state, you mentioned state roads. I know one of the pieces we're going to talk about, not that I don't want to, we just have a lot to cover and this is great. I'm very pleased about this. We didn't even talk very much about, we talked a little bit about the Broadway Bridge, which is a huge, huge project, and we're going to be keenly aware of that in the coming weeks as that gets underway. It's another one of those short-term inconveniences for a long-term vast improvement. A little less short-term than just a paving of a particular roadway. But is this a good time to transition into the conversation, picking up on the meeting that we had with Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff and David Carlucci's office, and talking about re-engaging with the DOT for some big picture improvements?
That would be great. So on our 2018 initiatives, we talked about the Route 9 improvements. Paul, thank you so much for that extra work that you did in this presentation. It's great. I would like for you to sit in on this. Oh. So I understand that the Route 9 reconfiguration, has been on the book since, well, I found some documents in my office since 1999. So we thought maybe we'd try to get it really done this time. But we met with Assemblywoman Galiff and a representative from Senator Carlucci's office to talk about ways that we could work together to engage the state in a discussion about how we can actually get this done now. And they're both very interested, but they have shared with me some information that they would really like the village board to discuss their willingness to move forward with this project from a state perspective, so that they know that when we go there and talk to them about what the stages are going to be on how we move this project forward, that the village is behind it. And so they were just asking us really to have a conversation and to get a general sense on whether that is still something that you're interested in doing.
Yes.
Confused.
I'm very good. Yeah, that's like you're looking for consensus.
Why would anybody? Yeah.
Because the last time this came up 13 years ago, they went very, 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 very far down the path. And we had Valerie come back a couple years ago and give us a look back on this is what the village did. And then it got to a point where the state said, okay, we just need this one more thing from you. And then there was some community pushback and the board got cold feet and walked away from it. And now here we are with this continually worsening traffic issue, which is the epicenter is right here. It's this intersection of
Right.
Route 9
Oh,
or 133, and it's completely dysfunctional. It's from whether you're driving, you're walking. It's it's horrible. Especially, I mean, we all avoid it and drive through all the surrounding neighborhoods, which they're not so happy about it either. So the question is from Sandy Galiff in particular, if the village if she's going to help facilitate this relationship with the DOT, and I know she was helpful with the town getting some traction from the DOT with some of the work that we're seeing with the town and the village of Briarcliff over by the intersection with North State Road, and then also with some of the stuff on 134. So she's very happy to help us get the attention that we need, because this is going to be a multi-year, long-term project. But she wants to be sure that the village is really saying, you bet, we need your help. We need this to happen. We can't do it without the DOT. We're behind it. How can we make this happen? Right? Is that the message? Is that what? And so we were suggesting maybe we pass a resolution just to that effect, so she can be confident in saying that, or that we write a letter to that effect.
I just have a question. Thank you so much for sharing how that meeting went and her feedback, and Senator Carlucci's representative's feedback and Assemblywoman Galiff's feedback. I did not know about that mishap in the past, so thank you. That's actually, that does give some clarity as to why it stopped. So it's good to know. Yeah. I would, though, if they could help us finding what was it that stopped it, and what is the it. And DOT should know when they kind of backed away from the project and why. That should all be on record. Moving forward, we'd be doing a resolution reaffirming that we want them to fix the road. Sorry, no, I'm just thinking out loud. Reconfigure the road.
So I think it's a resolution to support advancing the project.
Okay.
So this will be prepared by next meeting for legislative session?
It can be. If
Okay.
we hear a, general, please do it.
The resolution would be general, since we wouldn't be able to start the prospective project without them starting the project of the scope and all that. I'm just saying, the project kind of, it has to be vague right now because we don't know what the process of reconfiguring will be yet, right? Okay.
And so there's a system of steps, and I would like to work with them to say, okay, and Paul and I would work with them and say, these are the different steps, because we want to get to a grander vision of what Route 9 looks like from point to point on both of our ends, and also 134 and 133. But I know that the big crunch for all of us is Route 9 and this intersection that's right here at Croton. And then, just some of the turning radiuses, a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. So, I would like for you to be really excited about.
No, I am. I'm sorry. I just,
Yeah.
if I'm coming across
No,
as
not you
it's not
personally.
towards.
I'm just kind of looking around, going, "Oh, please be excited," because what we would do is we would look at what the process is going to be, and when the state could get some money in their budget. So they have a very long range plan for how they're spending their monies, and we need to get into that fold, because we're not in there right now. So depending on a lot of homework on our part as far as traffic counts, we're going to have to do a lot of work preliminary to give to the state to say, this is what our existing conditions are, this is what we're thinking is going to be happening in our community, and this is what we would really like. I mean, those are the kind of things we're going to have to prepare for them, and then they're going to have to get it into their funding streams. So the faster we raise our hand and say, pick us, the more chances we have at getting into to a funding cycle that makes sense for us. And there may be some preliminary short-term things that we could do in the interim to help alleviate some of the traffic congestion, but the overall goal is really what we're looking for and having that discussion. Now, the Assemblywoman had said to us that there are new people in the offices up in Poughkeepsie. There's new people that have come into the DOT, and so we're kind of looking forward to having new discussions as well. But I think your point about what's the history is very well taken. Thank you.
All right. So
I want to be selected right away.
Yeah, pick me. That's what I like to do. Pick me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can talk about what language to put into any resolution, just to make it such a clear statement of the benefits from an economic development perspective, a walkability perspective, you know, the health, and then connecting our community and
How we can't move
absolutely
forward without
safety.
this being done.
Absolutely. But also it is consistent with our comprehensive plan, the goals that are stated there, as well as the Downtown Redevelopment Working Committee recommendations. I mean, just in every turn, the community is behind this, the board is behind this, and that was apparently not the unifying sentiment the last time that this came about. We don't need to go into that tonight, but we can look back on some of the last time there was a presentation at a work session. Maybe that would just be a helpful review if we can find that link, because Valerie did do a look back for us just a couple of years ago that sort of recapped where we were up to that point and what happened in the last one. Okay, great.
So is that 5 people saying yes, yes, and yes, or
Yeah,
what?
let's,
What's
so
happening here?
if we need to actually vote on something so that Sandy has something like really official, and also it's us making an official launch of like, look, the community said they want this, the Downtown Redevelopment Working Committee said that this was critical for moving forward, and DOT know that this is really important to us, pay attention to us.
Yes, I'm okay with all that. I would just, after we submit that letter or a resolution, whatever we call it, I do want to send some more supplements. Albany's very reactive. Whether it's from businesses, whether it's how we cannot follow their economic development strategies that they're recommending for the Hudson Valley because of this, why we are different, why their roads are kind of paralyzing us on how it's operating. Picking a store about, you know, how they could be as far as their potential and their earnings if the pattern and, you know, configuration, getting into the complete streets, walkability. I mean, just if we could do that, and I don't know how, but we discussed it after the initial letter is sent, I'd be more than happy to.
Great.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
And that leads us
That's
to
a
the
big
next
yes.
topic, which is 200 Main Street. So I asked Paul to come. Paul and Andy and myself and Jamie, we did a walkthrough of 200 Main Street. I really wanted to get inside it and see it. It's stunning. It's really beautiful. It's a mess right now, but if you can look beyond the mess, there's some really great architectural features in there. The safe from the bank is in there. There's some good bones in there. And so we had talked about what is our strategy going to be for moving this forward. It is on our 2018 initiatives to do something. Paul and Andy are really good at doing this assessment, and they've come up with an idea of how we can sort of baby step our way through this. And so I'll let Paul talk about it.
So what we talked about. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. So what we talked about last time when 200 Main came up, and I think it was a work session, so I'm pretty sure it wasn't here, was the first thing we wanted to do was button up the roof. We have dunnage issues up there, old air handler units and condensers and the like on the roof, and the parapet walls and the flat roof is needs to be repaired. So we had sent down that proposal in hopes of getting a PO back to go forth with the roofing contractor and consultant that we typically use for items like this. I think it was less than $20,000, but I think after meeting in the field, which is what Debbie wanted to do first before she issued the PO, was do that walkthrough to find out why we recommended buttoning up the roof to take care of the rain intrusion and what have you. So that's in place now. We've had the meeting, and I think that that's the first step. And then once we get the roof taken care of, the second step will be to go in there with remediation contractors and start getting estimates to do that type work.
So I'm sorry I didn't put this up on a slide presentation, but I did take pictures that I'm sending around. I think that it's going to be really important that we invest some money into it so that we can repurpose this building, because in the condition that it's in, I'm not seeing anybody that's going to step up and spend the money that it's going to take in order to advance this. And so I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on this.
You had mentioned this last year, so I'm fine with it. Kind of knew this was coming, so I don't have any further comments.
I want to thank you for moving past some obstacles in the original plan for that building the past couple year and previous years. And one of my biggest frustrations and challenges has been during the wait process, during all the RFPs, during the conversations, during the possibilities of what the space could be, the fact that we refused to take care of our own building and we had the audacity to demand that people take care of theirs. We own the property, and unless we're okay with making a decision to allowing it to fall apart and then have to demolish it, which that is a decision that we have been doing past couple of years, past couple of boards, by not addressing the needs of our building. That's the end result. So I appreciate the fact that we're not even discussing what the board's going to be using the building for or next steps or vision, but it's our building, just like this is our building. It's our property. And for safety reasons, for the integrity of the building, for historic preservation purposes, I mean, there's so many reasons why maintaining a crumbling building should be a priority. And it wouldn't have gotten to this point if it would have been addressed before, regardless of who we were going to give the building to. This whole notion that we're going to sell it and we don't want to do it is not acceptable. It's our building. And all our properties, all our lands have to be taken care of. So thank you.
I agree.
Did you want to?
Yeah, so it's got great bones. I hear that, and I'm hearing that the building is, most of the damage is on the inside and the outside is in pretty good shape, or is the outside collapsing as well?
No, I mean, I'll let the engineer talk.
The building is structurally sound, and the exterior is more or less intact, minus the windows.
Right.
The windows, a lot of those are replacement windows from the original building, I believe, anyway. But even if we were to do some, they need some work because that's also a source of water intrusion into the building, and we need to dry the building out. And I think that's the first step, so this doesn't continue to degrade inside. So that's step one, and we get that done, and then concurrent with that work, we were going to go in and solicit some numbers for a contractor under the supervision of a testing agency come and do demolition and remediation work inside to create, which will essentially be a white space, basically just a big open air that takes. I think what we talked about when we were walking through there was taking out all the retrofit that's taken place over the decades in there, adding second floors and staircases, and just basically exposing the original bank, high ceiling bank lobby. Thank you. That existed back in the day.
So there's, because it's been wet, there's mold on the walls, and it's wet in the basement, so it's a little challenging. You can't get very far in the basement. There's one real pretty windowsill that has a nice green carpet mat on it, which is really just moss. And I call it the little putting green, but those kind of things have to be taken out. I think from a redevelopment perspective, it'll be a lot easier to bring somebody in who can envision a use for that building when it's clean. And it'll be so much easier for them to actually do the retrofit because the walls will be open and it'll be easy. So I just think it's a step that we have to take as a government to move that building. And I love historic buildings, and I just think it's gorgeous inside.
So what I'm So what I'm hearing is the first step is the roof, because there's actually, so making it watertight. I am entirely behind that, because we don't want it to be further degrading from what it is and creating more damage from where we are today. So that makes a lot of sense to me with the roof and the windows. Beyond that, I have no idea if we're talking about $40,000 or $400,000. And so I think I'm not ready to have that conversation. I'm entirely supportive of let's get it watertight with the roof and the windows. Is that all the ask is for tonight?
That is it. That is it.
Okay.
And then when we get a bid for how much it's going to cost on the inside, that's another conversation
Okay.
for us.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome, Paul. Thank you
Thanks,
for
Paul.
Thanks.
being there. And
Yep.
See you tomorrow.
All right. Debbie, CDBG.
All right, this should be a pretty quick conversation. So I met with the Westchester County Community Development folks, and they are going to be reinvigorating their CDBG program. I don't have a lot of history, many of you might, on what happened, and they stopped doing the program for a while, but they're
Yes, that's his name.
so they're going to reinvigorate that, and I was again one of the first people to go, oh, pick me, because there's so many opportunities for getting additional funds if we partner with the original group. So their intention is to go to all the partners that were in that consortium before and ask them to be a part of it again if they so desire. So we've already said yes, because I think that by submitting our projects to them and having them do the larger ask, we're more likely to get some of our projects funded. They gave me a list. It's about 4 pages long of all the money that the Village of Ossining has received over the many years they ran that program. And not only did the village get money, but also some of our nonprofits. So Open Door did, IFCA got some money, the Children's Center got some money. And so the process is really going to be for us to pass a couple resolutions. One is to be supportive of the consortium, and the second is to participate in the actual grant funding. What that will mean for us is that we'll have to put our own projects together, but then we'll work with our nonprofits to see if they have projects as well. And then we would submit them as a group. So there would be a public hearing where we would talk about potential projects, and then a decision to move those to the county. And then there would be a second public hearing where the county would hold it with all of the projects throughout the entire county. So there's be multiple opportunities for the public to engage in a discussion on what we're thinking. But you know, just having the availability of the funds is perfect, and it's something that I would really like to get involved with. And I think the partnership with the county it's good timing with them, and they actually came down here and met with us, and you know, I just think it's a great thing. So I wanted to ask you if you would be supportive of that, because we will have to prepare the resolutions that the county's asking for in order for us to get back in and participate.
Yes, as soon as possible.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
5 yeses.
Check, check. Moving right along.
Okay, next. Wow, that was really quick. Wait a minute.
Not tonight.
22.
Somebody else's money is never a problem.
Well, we always have to match, but it's
Yeah.
money well spent. It's well invested in
Don't
our
worry.
community.
Right.
It is
So
all
there are a lot of projects that we have on the books, and we have some money, and so
Absolutely.
having that match would be perfect because we can do so much more.
Mhm.
The next thing is the vacancy study, the RFP. I have modified that. Thank you, Quantel, for helping me
Yes.
with that. and I'll turn it over.
Yeah, so there was just a couple of clarifying points. And there are two that jump out. I know there are like 3 or 4, but I wanted to make sure that our consultants determined what units would actually be potentially subject to ETPA. There's also a section in here that says compare the results to the New York State ETPA regulations. That's also the 1974 law, but there's also was an amendment in 1993. That's there, and one of the important parts that really jump out is just allowing the consultant, if he deems necessary, to make site visits just to do some verification if necessary. I think that pretty much covers what we discussed. Everything else was minor details and making sure that it was tight.
So help me understand the first part of what you were saying, because we were talking about doing all the buildings from January 1st, 1974. And I know that there are some within there that would not ultimately not be part of ETPA, wouldn't be ETPA eligible. And there's some that are there's some developer or some property owners that are gonna be inevitably applying to get exempt status. They're gonna need to present to New York State HCR that, for example, they've done 75% of, there's a short list, but there's a list of how you can become exempt. But that determination doesn't have to be made by the state, by HCR?
So if you have done like 75%, 75%, like a major capital improvement or renovation, or if you meet certain criteria that are exempt, there are certain things that you have to go to NHCR, and there are certain things that that you just wouldn't be eligible for. So that, again, since we're paying someone, a consultant, to do so, the things that you have to confirm with the housing authority, or I don't want to say the acronym right now, you may have to do that on your own, but there are certain things that automatically would make you ineligible. So again, what we're saying is just make sure that you, to the best of their ability, that they can establish what units would be eligible for ETPA under the statute.
But to answer your question, Mayor Garrity, it would kind of go to the state as far as eligibility and people who challenge it or want to apply for different types of. But yeah, it would be under their agency.
So I assume that any consultant that we bring in is going to know where the line is. So we'll leave it up to their expertise.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
So if you're all good with this, then our plan would be to send it out tomorrow.
Okay.
Great.
We will be modifying the return date to the third Friday of April. With the first week being Easter, there'll be a lot of people off, but also because we're getting it out a week later than we originally had intended. I just wanted to let you all know that we're gonna just extend the deadline a week. Okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you.
3 minutes.
And now I'm going to step away. I'm going to recuse myself from the next item of business, and Deputy Mayor Codman will take over because I have a personal interest in this.
Is the meeting over after that, or?
Well, I'm not going far. I'm going to go right over there. I'll just go around the table.
It's,
so
I don't know, Jamie.
yeah, you can't really escape. I'm going to watch.
You can adjourn if you want. You can adjourn if you want. He can adjourn if he wants now. Kidding. Just
Madam
kidding.
Manager.
Are we?
Proceed.
on?
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Go on.
Thank you, Madam Manager. We have an application by the Sing Sing Kill Brewery for a cabaret license. It has been approved by both the building department and the police department. And in a memo from one of the partners, they anticipate hours of operation. They have 11:30 a.m. till midnight. It would have to actually start at noon, which is under our statute, and would be 7 days a week. There is no objection, as I said, from either building or police to the issuance of the cabaret license. So with the board's permission, I would like to have a resolution prepared for next week so that the cabaret license can be issued to the Sing Sing Kill Brewery for 2018. Comments?
I'm completely in favor of it. I'm excited that we're going to have a new business on Spring Street in downtown. I normally, I guess I'm looking at the site map. I just don't know where the music would be. I know that we require applicants to just show where it would be. Maybe it may just be me because I don't know how to read a plan. So that may just be me.
Yeah, I have the same plan that you do, Trustee Herrera. I know that the building inspector went in, actually, and he found no violations and all safety requirements had been installed and were operational. So that was, there with regard to it. So, but the specific location as to where that music's going to be, they're required to provide a layout of the inside, and which is what they had. Exactly where that's going to be, I could not tell you.
Do we normally require people? Do we require people to actually show specific locations of where?
I believe we require simply the plan of what the interior looks like in terms of where the tables are and bathrooms and things.
Oh, so then we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only time you want the other in terms of where is when we're doing our sidewalk cafe licenses, which is actually a manager awarded license. There's a little bit more, but here it's just basically what the layout is, and that's what we've been provided in this one.
So I'm good.
All right.
Fine with me. Everybody okay?
Yep.
Then on for next.
Adjourn?
We're done.
That's 4.
That's your one's adjourn.
Put it on the,
All right.
put it on the agenda.
I think we just set a record for the most items discussed.
Really? I was just
Oh,
gonna
such
say.
superstitious people. All right, so, if there's nothing else, then I'm good. Yeah.
I didn't do the spitting. Give me some credit.
It's good to not spit in public meetings. Okay, can we have a motion to adjourn to executive session for discussion of real property?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for joining us for this week's not as long as we anticipated work session, but now we're going to executive session, so the fun really begins. See you next week at Birdsall Fagan Police Court Facility on Spring Street. Good night.